Chapter 2401. Emo Qinglong reminded him. Use your powerful techniques as soon as possible. You can only withstand 10 breaths of my cultivation level. She cultivated the demonic path. If Su Yu borrowed it for too long, he could easily fall into the demonic path and lose himself, becoming a humanoid monster that only knew how to kill. Su Yu's heart shuddered, not daring to hesitate any longer. There were many secret techniques of the Dragon Clan, but there was only one that he had mastered and was the most powerful. Taking a deep breath, the dragon blood in Su Yu's body boiled and burned rapidly. Dragon blood boil! Su Yu bellowed, releasing the mysterious Dragon Clan incantation. In an instant, a vast, obscure power descended from the heavens and earth. The sky and earth were instantly dyed blood red. It was as if fresh blood had been splashed, extremely eerie. Finally, the blood-red color of the heavens and earth converged into a palm-sized ball of light, gathering within Xiegu body. Crack! Even as strong as Xiegu was, his body was breaking apart from the inside out. Streaks of red seeped out from his bones. It turned out that every part of his body had been destroyed by that obscure power. Walala! Chunks of shattered bones flew toward him, but Su Yu blocked them with his dragon body. He was shocked. The power of the dragon blood boil unleashed at different levels was vastly different. Unleashed by a middle stage Great Venerable, it could kill a later stage Great Venerable. Suddenly, Su Yu felt a shred of the explosion shoot out in the opposite direction. Looking at it, the shred was a little strange. It was not pale white but a faint gold. Even stranger, it seemed to have a spirit, as if it was alive. It could go against the force of the explosion. Su Yu chased after it, grabbing the shred with his dragon claw. Unexpectedly, the shred was terrifyingly heavy. Su Yu's 10,000-foot dragon body, with a cultivation level of a middle stage Great Venerable, was dragged downwards by the heavy shred, finally smashing into the ground with a thud. What is that? Emo Qinglong was shocked. It was just a shred of bone, so how could it be so heavy? Even Xiegu's entire skeleton could not be this heavy, right? Su Yu grinned, opening his palm. The golden shred lay quietly on his palm. He grabbed a piece of Evil Wolf's bone and compared it to the golden bone fragment. He realized that the two were completely different. They were not made of the same material. Moreover, what was very special was that this golden bone fragment was not tainted with any evil aura. Traces of evil energy that could be seen with the naked eye were attached to the golden bone fragments, attempting to seep into them, but to no avail. This bone fragment had been here for an entire epoch. Not to mention a piece of bone, even a great venerable realm powerhouse would be corrupted after a long time here. Looking at the howling firmament wolf lord, he had almost become a heavenly Tao lord when he was alive, but in the end, his skeleton was not completely demonized? Su Yu's gaze involuntarily drifted toward the tomb of ancient god Jin Xian as he recalled the sudden change in Xiegu's abilities. Emo Qinglong had the same thought, and his eyes were filled with bewilderment. Hey, could it be that you picked up a fragment of ancient god Gold Profound's remains? The two of them thought of the same thing at the same time. While his cultivation could still be used, Su Yu immediately went to the tomb of the Howling Firmament Wolf Lord and dug up the collapsed ruins to take a look. Sure enough, he found a gap as wide as an arm between the tomb of the Howling Firmament Wolf Lord and the tomb of the ancient god Jin Xian. The two were connected. The Howling Firmament Wolf Lord's bones must have dug a passage when the ancient tomb's seal was broken. Instinctively, he felt that fusing with this bone fragment would make him stronger. However, he did not expect to run into Su Yu and the former number 1 demonic cultivator of the North region. After confirming this, Su Yu was indescribably excited. Until now, he had only obtained the blood of the ancient god Jilong, and it was used to write letters. The remaining dried blood was indescribably weak. This was the first time he had obtained the bone fragment of an ancient god. He immediately turned back and stored the incomparably heavy golden bone fragment into a space storage device. Having done this, Su Yu heaved a sigh of relief, but he also felt an inexplicable sense of irritation. His heart was vaguely filled with an irritation that had nowhere to vent. Time's up. You have begun to be affected by my demonic energy. Mo Qinglong sensed Su Yu's abnormality and immediately withdrew his demonic energy. The irritation in Su Yu's heart quickly disappeared, as if it had found a floodgate. At the same time, his cultivation level returned to normal. The powerful feeling of looking down on the world receded like a tide, leaving him feeling empty. However, this feeling was forcibly erased in an instant. There was no need to be envious of others. As long as he could transform the other 8 great laws into the domain and become a pathmaster, his cultivation level would not be lower than the great venerable realm. After collecting his thoughts, Su Yu's gaze turned slightly and he sped towards the exit of the cemetery. Outside the cemetery, Zi Xiaoyun and the others were hesitating. They had sensed the great battle in the cemetery, but they did not dare to enter, nor were they willing to leave. At this time, students who had escaped came running out one after another. Su Yu was among them, his face full of fear. Seeing him, Zi Xiaoyun and Dan Haiqing's eyes flashed at the same time. They secretly thought that Su Yu was lucky to have survived. More than half of the students who had entered this time had died inside. Only Qin Hui knew that not only could Su Yu not have died inside, but the one who had fought with the Howling Firmament Wolf Lord was most likely Su Yu. "Wait here for the time being," Zi Xiaoyun said slowly. A day later, from the east, a majestic aura descended, appearing in the center of the cemetery. The person who had appeared was the Xie Sanren. His face looked a little weak, and it was obvious that he had not gained the upper hand in his battle with the mysterious elder. "Old geezer Xuanji, I'll remember this debt for now," the Xie Sanren snorted coldly. His eyes then fell on the ancient tomb of the ancient god Mysterious Gold. With just a glance, he could tell that something was amiss. He immediately jumped into the tomb of the Howling Firmament Wolf Lord, his expression changing abruptly. "Damned old thing, you really did something to the tomb of the ancient god Mysterious Gold." He hurriedly looked around and finally found the place where the evil bones had been scattered. His face was gloomy. "It's gone. Was it a diversion?" Suddenly, he raised his head and looked at the crowd at the entrance of the cemetery, rushing over quickly. As he landed, he asked, "Who scattered the Howling Firmament Wolf Lord's evil bones?" In response, Zi Xiaoyun was terrified. "We don't know either. After the evil bones unleashed their divine power was so great that we could not escape in time. We have no idea who suppressed them." The Xie Sanren narrowed his eyes, staring at the later stage celestial realm teachers. With a shake of his body, the storage artifacts of the teachers left their bodies and appeared in front of the Xie Sanren. He swept his gaze across the teachers, checking their storage artifacts one by one. After confirming that there were no relics of the ancient god Jin Xian, his expression was one of disappointment. "Looks like it was really old geezer Xuanji's plan to lure me away, then send someone to retrieve the relics. How detestable!" As for Su Yu and the other students, the Xie Sanren did not even think of checking their storage artifacts. The students had no chance of entering the depths of the cemetery. Entering would mean death. Furthermore, it was even more impossible to fight the evil bones. Therefore, he directly ignored the students. "Let's return to the East Region Divine Manor first." The Xie Sanren's tone was a little low. Su Yu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Luckily, he had not checked his storage artifact. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble. A few days later, the students returned to the East Region Divine Manor, and Su Yu returned to the Azure Dragon civilization. What a pleasant surprise! Su Yu took out his storage artifact, his face full of anticipation. Mo Qinglong was not in a good mood. Or rather, it was a narrow escape. That Xie Sanren is not a kind soul. He is even more savage than a demon like me. If he finds out that you took the ancient god Jin Xian's bone fragments, you will definitely be turned into a half-living puppet. Su Yu calmly said, even if someone were to die, wouldn't it be you, the number one demon of the north, who dies first? In his eyes, I am but an ant. Humph. Do you think I want to be with you? Mo Qinglong thought of his situation, his head aching. At this point, Su Yu's gaze was gloomy. Now that things have come to this, can you tell me what you mean by the item on the Xie Sanren? Mo Qinglong wanted to say something but hesitated. But at this point there was no point in hiding anything. It is not an item. To be exact, it is a living being, Mo Qinglong said. In the early years of the new era, the master of the mysterious Path Palace gathered the masters of the 4 great regions to discuss the division of the territories of the 4 great regions. Among them, the first-generation Eastern region lord used the excuse of suppressing the evil sovereign cemetery to ask the palace master of the mysterious Dao Palace for a magic treasure that could suppress the cemetery at any time in case of an emergency. Mo Qingdao revealed a secret that very few people knew about in the early era. Su Yu nodded. Did the master of the mysterious Path Palace agree? No. Mo Qinglong sneered. If the first-generation master of the East region really had such a treasure, the other 3 regions would have been conquered long ago. So, the master of the palace made other arrangements. He sent someone to follow the master of the East region. If anything happens to the cemetery, that person can take action and suppress the cemetery. Su Yu could not help but be curious. What kind of creature is that? I don't know. Apart from the master of the East region, no one knows, Mo Qinglong said slowly. The only thing I know is that that person has no self, no heaven, no earth. He is a pure and blank person. Moreover, he only has a single consciousness, and that is to suppress the graveyard. Apart from any changes to the graveyard, he will not do anything else. That person is still by the Xie Sanren's side and has not left his side at all. A person with no self? In other words, he does not even know who he is? That person has the power of the mysterious Path Master, and he is constantly releasing it. As long as we can get within 3 feet of him, we can use a bit of the mysterious Path Master's power to erase the Dragon Emperor's imprint. Mo Qinglong's eyes were filled with anticipation. Su Yu furrowed his brows. It was different from what he had imagined. That was not an item, but a living being. Things could be stolen, but how could a living being be stolen? If the other party resisted, the power of the mysterious Path Master would immediately turn him into ashes. So, do you have a plan to get close to that living being? Mo Qinglong asked. Su Yu's eyes flickered as he said, No, but I have some ideas. Tell me about it. Mo Qinglong's eyes suddenly lit up. Su Yu said slowly, If I am not mistaken, the injuries on the Xie Sanren's body are not small, are they? Chapter 2402. That's great. Su Yu's eyes flashed. If I'm not mistaken, the evil Sanren will definitely issue an important command soon. Are you so sure? Mo Qingdao did not understand where Su Yu's confidence came from. Su Yu chuckled. Of course. Mo Qingdao sighed. All right, I hope it's as you say. I will enter a deep slumber for the next few days. Do not disturb me unless it's urgent. Su Yu's heart skipped a beat. Was this the side effect of lending his cultivation to Su Yu? How could such a heaven-defying technique not come with a price? All right, Su Yu said. In the following time, Su Yu immediately went into seclusion to study the broken bones of the ancient god Jinxian. From the outside there was nothing special about it. He could not even feel the pressure it should have. It was just extraordinarily heavy. This thing is hard and heavy. I'm afraid ordinary attacks will not be able to see through its mysteries, Su Yu pondered. His eyes flashed, and he spat out an icy dragon's breath in an attempt to attack. In the end, the broken bones showed no signs of freezing. Then, he used many other techniques, but none of them could do anything to him. Could it be that I can't handle a piece of broken bones of the ancient god? Su Yu muttered to himself. After confirming that Mo Qingdao was really in a deep slumber, he took out the divine nine-dragon cauldron. As soon as the divine cauldron appeared, it trembled slightly. The 9 flying dragons roared, producing a weak response. Do the objects of the ancient gods sense each other? If that was the case, it would be easy. Su Yu placed the broken bones into the divine cauldron. Suddenly, the golden light on the surface of the broken bones dimmed, transforming into the color of crystal. A crystal bone? Su Yu was shocked. Looking at the crystal bone, there was a tiny drop of 9-colored liquid, as thin as a strand of hair. How could Su Yu not recognize this item? The blood of the ancient god? His heart skipped a beat. This was not the dried divine blood of the ancient god Jiulong, but the blood of a real ancient god that had been perfectly preserved. Although the amount was extremely small, not even a drop, just a trace, the energy contained within was probably unimaginable. At the very least, 10 drops of the insect ancestors' ancestral blood might not be able to compare to this drop of ancient god's blood. Under Su Yu's gaze, the drop of 9-colored blood slowly flowed out of the broken bones. Ancient god 9 dragons spun, and the weak sliver of ancient god blood slowly diluted until it was half a cauldron of god blood. Even so, the energy contained in a drop of diluted god's blood was still extremely terrifying. It was only slightly inferior to a complete drop of ancestral blood. Su Yu's heart was burning with passion. He tried to use a drop of divine blood to activate the ancestral dragon's strange feather and the insect ancestor's finger. However, he discovered that he couldn't activate them. It's been diluted too much. Su Yu was quite disappointed. However, just as he was feeling extremely disappointed, Su Yu suddenly discovered that his mind was much clearer when he stared at the divine blood. Much of the chaos in the past was now as clear as the moon in front of the clouds. Could it be that the diluted ancient god's blood has the ability to increase one's perception? The more Su Yu thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. What kind of existence was the ancient god? Standing at the peak of Daolords, they were peerless powerhouses comparable to the sacred mountain's heavenly suns. Their every move contained the great Tao of the heavens. A single drop of blood contained boundless power of comprehension. What was impossible about that? His heart warmed up and he swallowed the drop of ancient god blood. A wave of spiciness surged, and his whole body felt like it was being burned. It was unbearable. However, Su Yu's mind was unprecedentedly clear. Everything in the world seemed completely different to his senses at this moment. He endured the excruciating pain and took out the 9-5 supremacy art. He fixed his eyes on it. Previously, he couldn't even make out the slightest bit of the mysterious art. Now, he could finally understand some of it. The extreme of the world is the 9 and the 4 directions are the 5. When the yang energy is abundant, the flying dragon is in sight. Su Yu murmured in his heart as he entered the most mysterious state of mind. The pain in his body gradually faded away, and was replaced by a vast image. In the image, there was an old man dressed in ancient clothes with an ancient crown on his head. He was holding a long sword in the shape of a dragon, and he stood under the 10 giant projections with his head held high. Ordinary dragons, heed my command. The old man waved the long sword in his hand, and thousands of dragons dashed toward the 10 giant majestic figures like moths flying into a flame. Su Yu was shocked. He was shocked by the 10 majestic figures, and he was even more shocked by the sword in the old man's hand. It was the royal dragon's sovereign sword. It went without saying who the old man holding the sword was. The ancestral dragon. He was leading the dragons to fight against the 10 heavenly sons of the holy mountain. He wanted to continue watching, but the image stopped abruptly. Su Yu came back to his senses, but he couldn't calm down for a long time. When he inadvertently touched the royal scepter dragon's sword in his bosom, he faintly felt that there was a faint connection between him and the royal scepter dragon's sword. The 9-5 supremacy art also had an indescribable feeling. It is indeed effective. Su Yu was secretly delighted. He was about to take out another drop of the ancient god's blood when Qin Hui's urgent knocking came from outside the secret room. "Master, we have a mission." Su Yu had no choice but to put away the ancient god's blood and the divine nine-dragon cauldron. Opening the stone door, Su Yu asked, "Oh? What kind of mission?" "Head to the East Pole Market and purchase 3 boxes of myriad Tao stones." Qin Hui's expression was a little ugly. Just as Su Yu was about to ask where the East Pole Market was, Mo Wudao, who was on Su Yu's back, snapped out of his daze. "You were right. The evil Sanren gave an order." Su Yu said, "How do you know that it must be the evil Sanren's order? Do you still need to ask? The myriad Tao stone is the Path Master's divine healing medicine." Mo Wudao rolled his eyes, but the way he looked at Su Yu had changed. He was curious. How could Su Yu be so sure that the evil Sanren would give an order? What if the evil Sanren had the myriad Tao stone and did not need to give an order to search for it? Should I say that you guessed it, or that you have incredible foresight? Mo Wudao looked at Su Yu strangely. Su Yu's expression was calm. "Just take it as me guessing." Actually, this was all within Su Yu's expectations. According to his calculations, the evil Sanren could have given one of 2 orders. One was to send someone to search for the divine healing medicine. The other was that he had the divine healing medicine himself, but during the healing period, he would order his master to protect him in seclusion. Both orders were beneficial for Su Yu to get close to the legendary creature. Now that he had given the first order, it was also within his expectations. "Let's go," Su Yu said as he stood up. Mo Wudao was a little annoyed by Su Yu's confidence. "Haha, seeing how confident you are, I'm afraid you don't even know what kind of place the East Pole Market is?" Su Yu thought for a moment, then shook his head. "I don't need to tell you. I can guess. It should be the most chaotic place in the East region, right? It's probably a place where crooks and honest people from the East region and even the other 3 regions gather. It's a lawless place that even the divine manner of the East region cannot control." As soon as he finished speaking, Qin Hui covered her mouth. "Wow. Master, did you really guess that? It's almost the same as the real situation." Mo Wudao laughed. "I'm afraid you already knew about it. You're just showing off." Su Yu smiled. "That's not it. This is the first time I've heard of the East Pole Market. However, as the master of the East region, the evil Sanren needs to send his own people there to purchase the myriad Tao stone instead of having the people from the East Pole Market send it over. This shows that the market is not under his control. And a place that even the evil Sanren cannot control is definitely a place where darkness runs amok." Listening to his analysis, Qin Hui's face was full of admiration. "Master is really a godly person. A single leaf reveals autumn, and a single word reveals everything." Mo Wudao was also surprised. She could not tell that a human like Su Yu could be so intelligent. "Haha, then let's see how you play smart in the East Pole Market. That myriad Tao stone is not that easy to buy." Mo Wudao was convinced, but he was not convinced. Not long after, outside the divine manor of the East region, Su Yu, Mo Wudao, and Qin Hui met up with Dan Haiqing and Feng Qingyang of the Qilin team. This time, the evil Sanren had named the Azure Dragon team and the Qilin team to carry out the mission. Although Dan Haiqing did not like Qin Hui and Su Yu, this trip was of great importance. He did not dare obstruct them, lest he ruin the plan and incur the wrath of the evil Sanren. This round trip will take about 2 years. "Has the Azure Dragon team settled everything?" Dan Haiqing asked calmly, as if the grudge from before had never happened. Qin Hui nodded. "Everything has been settled. There's no time to lose. Let's set off as soon as possible." The 3 of them set off immediately, riding on an evil spirit heavenly ship of the East region divine manor. In an instant they traveled billions of miles toward the deepest part of the East region. The East region was the place closest to an 8-star civilization. Very few people ventured deep into its depth. Every once in a while, the 8-star civilization would release waves of destructive light to sweep away the starry universe outside of their civilization. Such waves of light could easily destroy living beings. Even great venerables would find it difficult to protect themselves under the destructive waves of light. In addition, there was no clear pattern to the release of the waves of light. No one knew if they would be hit by a wave of light while walking in the depths of the East region. Only the East Pole Market, which was built on an ancient ruin that had existed since the beginning of an era, was not afraid of the destructive waves of light. That was why it became a place of exile for evil people who had nowhere else to escape to. Because it was dark and chaotic there was no one to govern it. Hence, many shady transactions were held there. The myriad Tau stone was an extremely rare mineral that could heal Yellow Path Master's injuries. This item was extremely precious. At present, the myriad Tau stone on the market had long been sold out and had fallen into the hands of various Path Masters. And those Path Masters would never take it out to sell. Especially since the end of an era was imminent, as a holy healing item, it was even more impossible to sell it. If someone had to sell it, it would not be for sale, but for sale to someone else. The fate of that someone else could be imagined. Hence, the myriad Tau stone could only be sold in the East Pole Market. Who would dare to sell it anywhere else? It was likely that the relatives and friends of the deceased, or even the factions, would immediately discover it and start hunting it down. After half a year's journey, they passed through countless dead and desolate areas of the East region before finally reaching the end of the East region. In a dark and gloomy universe. The universe here was filled with mud of unknown origins. Civilizations floated on it, drifting with the wave. Where did the mud come from in the void? Suyu asked, puzzled. Chapter 2403. Qin Hui shrugged. It has existed since ancient times, and we are not very clear about its origins. Is that so? Suyu secretly noted it down. Under the leadership of Qin Hui and Dan Haiqing, a group of people flew to a civilization covered in mud. As soon as they entered the civilization, the stench was extremely pungent. There was no soil for ordinary creatures to reproduce in the civilization. Only martial artists, and powerful martial artists at that, could adapt to such a dead civilization. After landing, Qin Hui and Dan Haiqing divided the Tao coins they had brought, and each chose a side to search for the myriad Tau stone. Smart man, where are you going to find the myriad Tau stone? Mo Qinglong seemed to be testing Suyu. Suyu answered smoothly, there is no need to look for it. Someone will help me. Mo Qinglong was stunned, not understanding what Suyu meant. A crisp little girl's voice sounded behind them. Guest, do you need to buy something? I can lead the way. Turning around, he saw a pitiful 13-year-old girl in a green dress. She had a pair of especially lovable big eyes, and she was nervously pinching the corner of her clothes, looking weak. Mo Qinglong stared at Suyu suspiciously, wondering if this girl had been arranged by Suyu. How could there be such a person who could foresee things so quickly? Suyu smiled lightly. I want to buy the myriad Tau stone. Do you know where I can find it? The little girl nodded. I know I can lead the way, but I need 3 Tao coins. Sure. Suyu took out his money card and made a deal with her on the spot. Lead the way. If you buy the myriad Tau stone, you will be rewarded. Suyu patted her on the shoulder. The little girl led the way in front of them happily, and they came to a very well-decorated shop with the words, Treasure Heaven Pavilion. Looking inside, the counters were filled with forbidden items that were rarely seen in the outside world. Among them were the remains of the Dragon Clan that no one in the other 3 regions dared to sell. However, the shopkeeper was not at the counter. The business in the shop was cold and cheerless, and there was no one around. Shopkeeper Han, there are guests, the little girl shouted crisply. Oh, they are here. Behind the palace, a fat middle-aged lizard man walked out, his face full of kindness. Honored guests, please forgive me for not going out to meet you. The little girl pulled on his sleeves and said, "Customers, when you buy the myriad Tau stone, you must be cheaper." With that, the little girl left the Sky Treasure Pavilion obediently and waited outside. "No problem." The lizard shopkeeper smiled from ear to ear and invited Su Yu and the others to sit down. He said, "My 3 guests, you have come at the right time. Our Celestial Treasure Pavilion has just received a batch of myriad Tau stones, fresh goods, you know." Qin Hui was slightly happy. To be able to buy the myriad Tau stones so easily, it was much easier than expected. "What's the price?" The lizard shopkeeper said, 100 million Dao coin, 1 myriad Tau stone. Upon hearing that, Su Yu was secretly surprised. The price of the myriad Tau stone was ridiculously high. It actually required 100 million Dao coins. They needed to buy 3 boxes on this trip, a total of 300 pills. Wouldn't that require 30 billion Dao coins? Only the ruler of a region would be able to make such a large transaction. Qin Hui and Su Yu exchanged glances. The price was still within an acceptable range. The bottom line that Xie Sanren had given was 150 million Dao coins and below. 100 million Dao coins was completely acceptable. "How many do you have?" Qin Hui asked. The lizard shopkeeper rubbed his palms together. "We have a large stock. We have as many as you want, my guest." Qin Hui was about to mention the 150 pieces that the Azure Dragon Group was responsible for, but Su Yu interrupted and said, "Just 3 pieces will be enough." A hint of disappointment flashed across the lizard shopkeeper's eyes. "All right, please wait a moment, I will go to the back hall to get the goods." The lizard shopkeeper was still very happy that the transaction was successful and returned to the back hall. After waiting for him to leave, Qin Hui lowered her voice and said, "Master, why only 3 pieces?" Su Yu said indifferently, "Do you want people to know that you have 15 billion Dao coins?" After being reminded, Qin Hui realized that she had been careless. It was not a good thing to expose one's wealth in the East Pole market. However, Mo Qinglong's lips curled into a faint smile. He kept sizing up Su Yu with a meaningful look. After waiting for a moment, the lizard shopkeeper walked over with a palm-sized box. He gently opened the box in front of them. Inside, there were 3 irregular nail-sized pitch-black stones. The stones emitted all kinds of power of rules, which was exceptionally wonderful. This was the myriad Tau stone. Qin Hui glanced at it and said, "Can you check it?" No one would feel at ease just by looking at such an expensive item. Only by touching it with their own hands could they verify its authenticity. This is the rule, of course. The lizard shopkeeper was very easy to talk to. He presented the small box with both hands and said, "Please feel free to take a look." As he spoke, he tactfully stepped back to prevent the guests from being on guard. However, just as Qin Hui was about to lower her head to check, the retreating shopkeeper suddenly retreated into the back hall. His strange action immediately made Qin Hui feel uneasy. "It's a trap." Without thinking, she threw away the small box in her hand. Although her reaction was fast, she was still a step too late. The 3 myriad Tau stones in the small box shattered with a cracking sound, and black filaments shot out from the inside of the stones. The filaments were extremely sticky, and as soon as they were shot out, they stuck to Qin Hui's body. Su Yu was not spared either, and his whole body was sprayed all over. He tried to use his primordial power to shake it off, but Qin Hui's power as a path master could not do anything to it, much less the primordial power. In the end, Su Yu used the Ice Dragon's dragon breath, but there was nothing he could do. At the same time, with a crash, the doors of the Heavenly Treasure Cabinet closed. The lizard shopkeeper walked out from the back hall, looking at Su Yu, Qin Hui, and Mo Qinglong, who were stuck to the stones. His face was filled with a cold smile. "My 3 customers, I'm sorry. My shop has not been open for business for a long time, so I can only scrape some money from you." Qin Hui was furious. Would anyone come here to harm the customers in broad daylight? The lizard shopkeeper laughed disapprovingly. Haha, this is the East Pole Market. Who doesn't scam people in broad daylight? Have you learned something new? Qin Hui was speechless. She had really learned something new. What do you want? Qin Hui shouted. The lizard shopkeeper licked his lip. Of course I want to scrape 300 million Dao coins from you first, then sell you. Of those two, one is from the human race, the other is from the demon race, and you are from the moon lady race. You are all rare breeds, hee hee. Qin Hui was so angry she could not say a word. Su Yu's expression was calm as he said, If I were you, I would hand over the 3 myriad path stones now, and I could spare your life. Every outsider who comes to my place will say the same thing, but what happens to them, hee hee. The lizard shopkeeper waved a bottle of liquid in his hand. Once they consumed it, no matter how high their cultivation levels were, they would lose consciousness. I am different from them, Su Yu said, suddenly taking out the heaven-destroying rod. Grow! Swoosh! The heaven-destroying rod suddenly became 1,000 feet long. The other end accurately touched the lizard shopkeeper's forehead. With a splat, his skull was crushed by the heaven-destroying rod, and he died on the spot. Don't! Qin Hui wanted to stop him, but it was too late. She laughed bitterly. If he dies, who will undo this sticky thread? Su Yu said calmly, he naturally has a way to undo it. He took a deep breath and found the space storage device on him. After searching for a while, he found a bottle of snow-white liquid. He dripped a drop on the black sticky thread, and the thread melted completely. After a cup of tea's time, everyone finally removed all the sticky threads from their bodies. Damn it! How dare you betray the East Region Divine Palace? Qin Hui kicked the lizard shopkeeper fiercely and crushed his space storage device in disappointment. She had checked it, and there was no myriad path stone in it. Ha ha ha! Emo Qinglong couldn't help but laugh. Smart man, is this the myriad path stone that others found for you? She finally found a handle on Su Yu. Su Yu's face was calm, as if he had not heard anything. He silently opened the door of the Heavenly Treasure Pavilion. As soon as he opened the door, he heard the slightly sinister and hoarse laughter of a little girl coming from outside the door. Old ghost, this time you should give me a big one, right? However, when he opened the door, he saw Su Yu and the others. The lizard shopkeeper's corpse was lying on the ground coldly. The little girl's smile disappeared, and she reacted quickly. Without thinking, she took out a scroll and tore it. A ball of green light flashed within the scroll, and the little girl disappeared without a trace, not even leaving a trace of her aura. Qin Hui blinked. From the moment the little girl appeared, it was a trap? Emo Qinglong's smile deepened, as if he was watching Su Yu make a fool of himself. She had seen from the beginning that the little girl was not what she appeared to be. On the surface, she looked like a weak little girl, but in reality, she was an old demon woman on par with her. It was laughable that Su Yu had prided himself on being smart, but in the end, he had been bewitched and believed her words. However, the next moment, Emo Qinglong couldn't laugh anymore. Because Su Yu had taken out a jade plate, and there was a spot of light moving rapidly on it. He murmured, "You could say that. From the moment the little girl appeared, I set a trap for her." Wait. Emo Qinglong stared at Su Yu. What do you mean? Qin Hui was shocked. Master, did you know from the beginning that the little girl had another identity? Su Yu rolled his eyes. Isn't that obvious? How could a weak girl survive in a dark place like the East Pole Market, which was filled with darkness and evil? It doesn't take a genius to figure out that she isn't what she appears to be. Qin Hui couldn't help but shrink her neck. It seemed like among the three of them, she was the only one who hadn't realized it. Then, Master, did you locate her? Su Yu nodded. My 3 Tao coins aren't that easy to get. Emo Qinglong immediately recalled that when Su Yu handed her the 3 Tao coins, he seemed to have patted her shoulder. Could he have secretly left a mark then? Why did you leave a mark? This old demon woman is at most a cooperating habitual criminal. She's just a small fry, so what's the use of locating her? Mo Qinglong asked doubtfully. Su Yu's gaze sharpened, as if he were an eagle that could see through everything. Chapter 2404. After this analysis, Mo Qingdao was left speechless. Her state was too high, so she disdained to analyze an insignificant person. Thus, she neglected many details that she did not pay attention to. However, Su Yu was observant and meticulous, and his analysis was meticulous. She couldn't help but admire him. Qin Hui's eyes lit up. Could it be that she's not alone and has an accomplice? Su Yu nodded with a smile, then shook his head. It's not as simple as an accomplice. There must be an organization behind him. Otherwise, why would he dare to swindle us in such an ostentatious manner? Mo Qinglong frowned. So what if we find that organization? They might not even have the myriad Tao stone. Qin Hui couldn't see through Su Yu's thoughts either. They were here to look for the myriad Tao stone, not to punish evil. They do, and they surely have a large stock of them, Su Yu said calmly. Mo Qinglong asked in surprise, How can you be sure? Su Yu chuckled. Did you forget that when I asked her about the myriad Tao stone, she did not hesitate to say that she knew about it? This means that she is very familiar with the myriad Tao stone. Either she has it on her, or she often sees it. With that said, Mo Qinglong and Qin Hui recalled that the little girl's reply was indeed unusually fluent. The myriad Tao stone was something that only Dao Lord powerhouses would use, and it was rarely circulated in the market. A little girl, suddenly being asked about the myriad Tao stone, should also be unfamiliar with it. However, this girl answered without even thinking, showing that she was indeed very familiar with the myriad Tao stone. The way Mo Qinglong looked at Su Yu finally changed. Human, you are indeed interesting. Qin Hui was of the same opinion. Su Yu's life experience, and wisdom did not seem like that of a 100-year-old boy. Even an old monster like her, who had cultivated for hundreds of millions of years, felt the pressure. But master, why do you have to go through so much trouble to personally enter her trap and risk your life? Couldn't we have just captured her and forced her to tell us the location of the organization? Qin Hui asked curiously. In her opinion, entering the Sky Treasure Pavilion was completely unnecessary. Su Yu shook his head calmly. If I had interrogated her from the very beginning with her vigilance, she would most likely not have fled back to the organization. Instead, she would have tried her best to get rid of me. Only by shocking her with blood can she be scared into fleeing back to the organization. When Qin Hui heard this, she finally understood the meaning behind it. If it was a normal danger, the girl would definitely use her familiarity with the East Pole market to try her best to shake them off. However, if they were in mortal danger, they would be so frightened that they would immediately flee back to the organization. Qin Hui was shocked. Su Yu had only been in contact with the girl for 10 breaths' time, yet he had already calculated everything perfectly. He had even considered the details of her gaze. Looking at the young man in front of her, Qin Hui hugged herself inexplicably, feeling a chill run through her. Mo Qinglong's eyes were filled with fear and uneasiness. In the past, she had assumed that Su Yu was merely a person who possessed a powerful magical treasure, which was why she had dared to use the innate soul fusion technique and attach it to his body. However, the scene in front of him overturned everything he knew. The human she had possessed not only had a strong providence, but the most frightening thing about him was his flawless calculation. Even though she was an old monster who had lived for half an era, she couldn't help but feel a chill in her heart. With such an enemy, it would really be hard to eat or sleep in peace. Even if his cultivation was still very, very low as she thought of this, she couldn't help but wonder if Su Yu would plot against her in the future and take revenge on her for forcefully possessing his body. Ahem. Su Yu. If there's anything you don't understand in the future regarding your cultivation, feel free to ask me. I can still give you some pointers. Mo Qinglong coughed dryly, trying to be friendly. Su Yu didn't expect Mo Qinglong to have so many thoughts in such a short time. He said calmly, You can't give me pointers on my cultivation. He didn't lack anything, except the laws of domain. As for the 7 great laws, there probably wasn't anyone in the world who could give him pointers. You! Mo Qinglong frowned, feeling both angry and amused at the same time. He was the greatest demon of the North region, yet he had humbly offered to give pointers to a half-path master, yet the other party didn't appreciate it? Many strong men had given everything they had in order to ask for his guidance, yet Su Yu had done it. However, even though he was angry, Su Yu's cultivation and strength were indeed too strange. His cultivation and physique were obviously not commensurate. His physique was at the later stage of the celestial realm at its strongest, almost reaching the great venerable realm. However, his cultivation was still stuck at the level of a half-path master. She was very puzzled. With Su Yu's luck and wisdom, was it difficult to turn his laws into domain? How could he still be at the level of a half-path master? She stared at Su Yu meaningfully, then said, "Could it be that you're cultivating 2 laws, and are planning to turn them into domain at the same time to become a dual domain master?" I guess so, Su Yu said. In fact, he was cultivating 8 laws. Hiss! Qin Hui, who was at the side, sucked in a breath of cold air. In this era, there's still someone who dares to try dual domains. Mo Qinglong was also surprised. Do you know how difficult it is to achieve dual domains? When one becomes a path master, the obstruction of the heavenly law will be more than twice that of a single domain master. Almost no half-path master can successfully achieve dual domains, except for some special constitutions. Special constitutions included the 9 divine bodies. If they knew that Su Yu had cultivated the 8 great principles, which were the most profound and abstruse 8 great principles, it was unknown what they would think. Everything will work out when it comes to it. There will be a way. Su Yu didn't want to discuss it further. Mo Qinglong looked at Su Yu deeply. Her rationality told her that a dual domain master couldn't possibly appear in this era. But in terms of emotions, this human, whom she couldn't see through, might succeed. Let's go after him. Su Yu interrupted their thoughts and went to a residential area in the East Pole Market. In an abandoned house, there was a deserted ancient well in the yard. However, there was another world under the ancient well. A group of martial artists of different ages gathered together, exchanging their experiences. At that moment, the little girl landed, and there was a trace of panic on her face. Our maiden of youth is back. Did you do something big again? A martial artist mocked. The little girl was furious, and she shouted, "Shut up! I'm in a bad mood. Where's the second head?" As she spoke, she walked toward the depths of the ancient well. A middle-aged man was counting the dark stones, and there were dozens of them. "Xiaoge?" The middle-aged man put away the dark stones and said in surprise, "You're back so early. Did you get exposed?" Xiaoge nodded gloomily. "Yes, I ran into a group of ruthless people, and they killed the lizard shopkeeper. I reacted in time, so I escaped quickly." The middle-aged man frowned slightly. The lizard shopkeeper is a strong man at the early stage of the celestial realm. Those people fell into the trap, and they were able to kill the lizard shopkeeper. The strength of the people who did this is not to be underestimated. You're really lucky to come back alive. Xiaoge said unhappily, "Second head, do you mean to let it go just like that? Do you still want to take revenge? We're just bringing business to those unscrupulous shops, not fighting with people," the middle-aged man criticized. "There are rules in every trade and you can't act recklessly," Xiaoge said, "but those people seem to be very rich. According to my observation, there are 2 groups of people, and their target is the myriad Tao stone." The middle-aged man's eyes shone brightly. Those who came to look for the myriad Tao stone must be rich. However, he was still patient and shook his head. "We're only in the business of leading the way, not in the business of killing and robbing." Only then did Xiaoge reluctantly give up. "They're lucky. But at that moment, with a crash, the top of the entire ancient well was forcibly penetrated. Several figures descended calmly into the ancient well. "I think it's you who's lucky." Su Yu crossed his arms in front of his chest, coldly looking down at the group of swindlers below. "I wanted to catch you all in one fell swoop, but seeing that you have no intention of killing us and robbing us, I'll let you go. How dare you trespass here?" The second head's face suddenly changed, and without hesitation, he released the powerful cultivation of the middle stage of the celestial realm, trying to force them back. Qin Hui curled her lips and said disdainfully, "Back off if you don't want to die." Her body shook, and the powerful pressure of the late stage of the celestial realm swept out, suppressing everyone, including the second head, to the ground. The second head's face changed dramatically. "Late stage of the celestial realm, where are you from? Are you a teacher of the East Region Divine Palace?" In the entire East Region, there were only a few strong men in the late stage of the celestial realm. Except for a few in the East Pole Market, the rest were from the East Region Divine Palace. The woman in front of him was so unfamiliar, and there was no doubt that she was from the East Region Divine Palace. "Cut the crap, you know what we're here for, right?" Qin Hui snorted coldly, glancing at the shivering Xiao Gu out of the corner of her eye. The second head's heart was bitter, and he realized that it was Xiao Gu who exposed his whereabouts and attracted the other party. He did not quibble and said, "What do you want, please say it." Qin Hui said, "Hand over all the myriad Tao stones." "What? How could the second head bear to do that?" These myriad Tao stones were accumulated by their organization over the years, to be used to deal with the destruction of the era. How could he hand them all over at once? "We are willing to compensate you with Tao coins," the second head said. Qin Hui snorted coldly, and with a wave of her hand, she forcibly snatched his space storage device. After a brief inspection, her eyes suddenly lit up. 58 myriad Tao stones. Then, she snatched all the space storage devices one by one, and said with joy, "Everyone has one." After a rough calculation, there were more than 130 myriad Tao stones, and there were still 20 more to complete the task. "You can't do this, these are all our hard-earned money." The second head was pressed to the ground, and he begged hysterically. They had used all the money they had accumulated over the years to buy the myriad Tao stones. How could they have known that Su Yu and the others would have emptied it? Qin Hui's eyes were cold. "Hard-earned money? Is it the money exchanged with other people's blood? You know how many people you have killed over the years. Today, not killing you is already a great gift to you. If you say one more word, I will slaughter all of you." Among the people in the East Pole Market, to put it bluntly, 9 of them deserved to be killed, and the remaining 1 deserved to die. None of them were innocent. If Su Yu had not ordered in advance not to take their lives, he would have killed them all as soon as he appeared. Only then did the group of people obediently crawl on the ground, not daring to resist. Having obtained something satisfactory, Su Yu and the others left. Chapter 2405. In her opinion, Su Yu would not hesitate to kill all of them. Darkness has its own rules. It's better for us not to interfere in this chaotic area, lest we get into trouble. Su Yu's eyes were slightly vigilant. The East Pole Market must have had its own dark order to survive until now. Otherwise, the various forces and strong men would have been at war with each other. How could it be so peaceful on the surface? The one who created the order must be a powerful being who was superior to all of them. That person was the one Su Yu was afraid of. It was not a wise move to start a massacre in the East Pole Market. There are still 20 left. We'll try to get them through the proper channels, even if the price is a little higher, Su Yu instructed. Qin Hui was stern. "Yes, master." After the 3 of them left, the people in the ancient well heaved a sigh of relief. But looking at the space storage devices that had been searched, they were all dispirited. "Second head, what should we do? Our years of hard work have all been stolen." Xiao Gu was full of regret. If they had known that this group of people was so difficult to provoke, why would they have asked for trouble? Now it was all over. What else can we do? The middle-aged man sighed. The East Pole Market is a place where people rob each other. We can only blame ourselves for being weaker than them. Xiao Gu said unwillingly, informed the head. He is at the later stage of the celestial realm. Maybe he can catch up with them. Shaking his head, the middle-aged man said, Don't waste your energy. They are the teachers of the East Region Divine Palace. At the same level, their treasures and divine techniques are more powerful. It will be difficult for the head to take advantage of them. Besides, the middle-aged man had a strange expression. The head should be with Madame Du Ming now. This is not the time to disturb him. At the mention of Madame Du Ming, Xiao Gu could not help but tremble. If the East Pole Market was said to be a gathering place for a group of vicious criminals, then Madame Poison Fate was a sinner among sinners. It could be said that she was the underground queen of the East Pole Market. Since she came to the East Pole Market half a century ago, she had ruled it with absolute power and became the master behind the scenes. She had set a series of rules that restored the East Pole Market from its initial state of chaos to its current calm. You could offend anyone in the East Pole Market, but never Madame Du Ming. Offending her meant death. As for their first master, because of his handsome appearance, he was fortunate enough to be noticed by Madame Poison Order. Every month, he had the opportunity to receive 2 hours of Madame Poison Order's favor. For this reason, the first master had gone to Madame Poison Life's mansion 10 days ago to wait for her. Calculating the time, he should be back soon. Why don't we get the first master to beg for Lady Poison's life? Xiao Gu thought. Second head laughed self-deprecatingly. In the eyes of Madame Poison Life, we are no different from ants. She won't waste her energy to help us recover the myriad Tao stone. Sigh, Xiao Gu let out a long sigh. They had really failed this time. However, just as they were sighing, a cold reprimand entered their ears. So there's another nest. I knew it. You're not alone. Who? The middle-aged man's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't even sense the other party's aura, so this person's cultivation must be far higher than his. Dong, a pitch-black shadow suddenly fell from above and rolled on the ground. When it stopped and took a closer look, everyone turned pale with fright. Xiao Yuan. It was the head of a sweet-looking girl. She was also one of them. Xiao Yuan and Xiao Gu had been waiting outside for their prey. They had never thought they would be killed. Ha, a bunch of petty thieves. How dare you deceive me? Today I will wipe you all out. The person who spoke was none other than Dan Haiqing. He had been targeted by Xiao Yuan the moment he separated from Qin Hui and the others. Just like what had happened to Su Yu and the others, they had fallen into a trap. Dan Haiqing used his powerful cultivation to destroy the black shop. At the same time, he killed Xiao Yuan, who could not escape in time, and found her nest according to her memory. Seeing Dan Haiqing start a massacre, the group of people naturally did not dare to wait for death and fought back. However, Dan Haiqing had been at the later stage of the heaven realm for a long time. His cultivation was unfathomable. How could a motley crew like them fight against him? The first to be killed was the middle-aged man who was the second head, followed by Xiao Gu. Everyone else was suppressed under the ancient well and slaughtered one by one. After a cup of tea's time, Dan Haiqing stood in a pool of blood. There was no one left alive. With a look of greed in his eyes, he took the second head's space storage device and searched it. His face darkened. He then searched the other space storage devices but found nothing. Damn it! This is a wasted trip. Dan Haiqing crushed the space storage device in his hand angrily. How could he be so kind as to punish evil? He had come here with the same purpose as Su Yu. However, he did not know that Su Yu had already gotten there first. I have to search slowly. Dan Haiqing flew out of the ancient well and threw out a divine technique, setting everything in the ancient well on fire. Suddenly, the fire soared into the sky and thick smoke filled the air. It was not until a day later that the fire was finally extinguished, leaving behind a ground full of charred corpses. Dan Haiching was nowhere to be seen in the ruins. He was replaced by a handsome middle-aged man with a head full of green hair. At this moment, his eyes were wide open and his fists were clenched tightly. His face was full of grief and indignation. He was the leader of this organization. He had just returned from Madame Du Ming's place when he saw a scene that made his heart bleed. His brothers and sisters who had accompanied him for many years had all been brutally murdered. Only a few people who were out hunting did not return to the ancient well and escape. Go and find out who did it. The leader's face was gloomy. Yes, leader. The few remaining companions behind him immediately went to investigate with hatred. With their connections in the East Pole market, it was not difficult to find the real culprit. It was only a matter of time. On the other side, Su Yu and the others were wandering around the various shops, buying 20 myriad Tao stones at a price far higher than 150 million Tao coins, barely completing the mission of 150 myriad Tao stones. I can finally go back and report. Qin Hui heaved a sigh of relief. This was the first time CS Sanren had asked the Azure Dragon Group to carry out a mission. The mission had been successfully completed, and they could report back. Emo Qinglong asked Su Yu, "You have a chance to get close to the man without me?" Su Yu nodded slightly. 90% sure. 90%? That was quite high. Master, should we wait for Dan Haiching and the others, or should we go back first? Qin Hui asked. Su Yu did not hesitate. Naturally, we should leave as soon as possible. The East Pole market is not a place to stay for long. After saying this, the group of people immediately left the East Pole market. As for Dan Haiching, the myriad Tao stones were too difficult to find on the market. He had searched many shops, but they were rarely sold. Occasionally, one or two would be sold, but the price was ridiculously high, far exceeding the bottom line of 150 million Tao coins. With the limited Tao coins he had on him, it was impossible to buy one. Seeing time pass, Dan Haiching's eyes flashed with a ruthless glint. Feng Qingyang, you go back first. I will stay behind and slowly search. Feng Qingyang did not suspect anything, cupping his fists and leaving. Dan Haiching remained alone in the market, his long and narrow eyes slowly squinting. Don't blame me for being ruthless. You can only blame yourselves for being too evil. A few days later, the East Pole market was greatly shaken. In one night, the owners of 23 shops had been killed, all of their belongings stolen. Of those killed, the lowest cultivation level was early stage Heaven Realm, and the highest was middle stage Heaven Realm. The culprits' methods were extremely cruel. Everyone in the shops, including the owners, was killed. Even the family members of the owners were not spared. This matter caused everyone in the East Pole market to panic, all of them guessing who the culprit was. Meanwhile, in a certain underground palace in the East Pole market, in front of a towering door, the headmaster knelt bitterly, not saying a word. He had already knelt in front of Madame Poison Fate's door for 3 days and 3 nights, only asking her to seek justice for him. However, Madame Poison Fate refused to see him. He struggled internally. If he continued to wait, and Madame Poison Fate still refused to see him, then the culprit would probably have already escaped the East Pole market. It would be better for him to go all out and fight the culprit until both sides suffered. At this moment, the huge door opened slightly, and an exceptionally handsome young man poked his head out. He said, "Head Wu, Madame Poison Fate has summoned you." Hearing this, Head Wu was overjoyed. He immediately entered the door and came to a wide cave shrouded in a misty pink mist. There were many handsome men. Some were elegant, some were tall and sturdy, and some had extraordinary bearings. They were all rare handsome men. They chatted with each other, surrounded by an enchanting and charming middle-aged woman. Her appearance could not be said to be very beautiful, but she was not too ugly either. However, Her attire was full of charm. Before Head Wu could speak, Madame Poison Fate said, "Is this the person who killed your sons?" Her voice was unusually rough, more manly than a man's. Head Wu was already used to it. He looked at the portrait condensed at her fingertips and saw that it was Dan Haiqing. "It's him. It's him." Head Wu investigated and learned that Xiao Yuan's head had been taken away by a person with this appearance. He speculated that it was most likely this person. Madame Poison Fate's eyes were cold. The people from the Eastern Region Divine Palace must have eaten a bear's heart and leopard's gall to kill and use force in my territory. There was no doubt that the major incident of 23 murders in one night had alarmed her. It would not be difficult to find the real culprit if she went all out to investigate. Others might not know who Dan Haiqing was, but of course she did. How could she not know the famous teacher of the Qilin group of the Eastern Region Divine Palace? It seems that he has forgotten himself after not paying a visit to the evil old man for a long time. Madame Poison Fate swung her sleeves. "Men, get out of the palace. I will personally hunt him down." At this moment, someone said, "Madam, according to our investigation, there is another group of people from the Eastern Region Divine Palace. How should we deal with them?" "Kill them together," Madame Poison Fate said coldly. The wantonly slaughter of the people from the Eastern Region Divine Palace had already touched her bottom line. If she did not teach them a lesson with blood, wouldn't people look down on the East Pole Market? Outside the East Pole Market, a warship left at an extremely fast speed. Dan Haiqing stood with his hands behind his back, rubbing the spatial storage device filled with 1.5 million Dao stones. Dan Haiqing was satisfied. "There are 22.5 billion Dao coins left. Should I hand them over or keep them for myself?" The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He naturally chose the latter. Chapter 2406. Dan Haiqing had obtained a windfall and was exceptionally satisfied. He thought to himself, "Qin Hui and the rest probably haven't even gathered 10 myriad Tao stones. They might still be searching in the East Pole Market." He could imagine that after that night's tragedy, the East Pole Market would definitely be under martial law. As members of the Eastern Region Divine Abode, Qin Hui and the others did not have it easy. Thinking of this, he laughed gloatingly. "You can't blame me." As soon as he finished speaking, he sped up and left the East Pole Market. According to his estimation, it would take several days for the East Pole Market to react and find the real culprit. At that time, he'd already vanished without a trace. The Eastern Domain was so vast, where else could they find him? While Dan Haiqing was deep in thought, he suddenly felt uncomfortable. He lowered his head and scanned the storage space. To his surprise, he discovered that the myriad Tao stone from one of the shops was actually burning on its own. Shocked, Dan Haiqing quickly extinguished the fire. "Fortunately, I made it in time." Looking at the slightly damaged myriad Tao stone, Dan Haiqing heaved a sigh of relief. However, he soon realized something, and his expression stiffened. "Not good. I've been tricked. That fire should not have been extinguished." In the sky above the East Pole Market, Madame Poison Life held a pitch-black flame in her hand. Suddenly, the flames flickered without warning. Madame Poison's lips curled up. "Found it." He was looking in the direction of Dan Haiqing. "I'll be gone for 10 days. Madame Poison Fate ordered. Then, she tore through the void and chased after him. Dan Haiqing's expression was dark and uncertain. After a few changes, he sped up and fled without hesitation. Because of this, he didn't hesitate to exhaust a large amount of his Daelord's power to activate his flying magical treasure to escape. This escape went on for 5 days and 5 nights. Dan Haiqing's face was pale, and he was extremely weak. However, he gritted his teeth and did not dare to stop for a moment to rest. This was because 2 days ago, he had clearly felt a powerful fluctuation behind him. They were getting closer and closer. He had already guessed that it was most likely the unparalleled expert who had ignited the myriad Tau stone who had caught up. Thinking to this point, his heart sank. Just as he was feeling extremely worried, he suddenly felt a calm fluctuation not far away from him. Furthermore, there was an exceptionally familiar aura. He was shocked. Qin Hui, Suyu? Aren't they still at the East Pole Market? He found it extremely inconceivable. However, on second thought, a look of pleasant surprise appeared on his face. The heavens have not wronged me. Gritting his teeth, he continued to drive his magic treasure to chase after Zhang Xian. Several hours later, he arrived at a broken meteorite. On the fallen star, Qin Hui, Suyu, and the others stood there. Qin Hui raised her eyebrows. Dan, why are you alone? If Dan could sense of Dan Qingyang, they could sense he. Feng Qingyang left first. Why? Didn't he meet you? Dan Haiqing pretended to be surprised. Feng Qingyang had left a few days later than Su Yu and the rest. How could he have caught up with Qin Hui and the rest? Now, he was probably left far behind. Qin Hui shook her head. Her eyes flickered as she sized up Dan Haiqing. Teacher Dan, are you in big trouble? He looked so weak that he couldn't hide it even if he wanted to. Dan Haiqing sighed and said, Sigh, it's a long story. I met someone who framed me, and in a fit of rage, I killed the shopkeeper and the guide. Who would have thought that I would be hunted down by the East Pole Market? Since we're both from the East Region Divine Palace, please protect me. When I recover my cultivation, I will definitely reward you generously. Qin Hui wanted to refuse. They were teachers of the East Region Divine Manor. How could they not know each other's character? Dan Haiqing's words were probably half true and half false, but if he did nothing when the other party was in trouble, he would be punished if the evil Sanren heard about it. All right. Leave after you recover. Don't drag us down. Qin Hui agreed reluctantly. Thank you, Teacher Qin. Thank you. Dan Haiqing was grateful. Under their protection, he recovered his path master powers. Half a day later, Dan Haiqing had completely recovered. His face was rosy. He smiled at Qin Hui. I will remember your kindness. I will repay you when I return to the East Region Divine Manor. Qin Hui calmly said, Cut the crap, let's go. She did not want to shield Dan Haiqing. Haha, I will leave now. Dan Haiqing cupped his fists and left. Qin Hui only heaved a sigh of relief when she saw him completely disappear from her senses. That old fox got lucky. Su Yu's eyes flickered. He felt that something was wrong. Based on his understanding of Dan Haiqing, since he was being hunted by a strong enemy, he would try his best to stay and fight the enemy with them. How could he leave so openly? Su Yu narrowed his eyes and looked at the place where Dan Haiqing had stayed. At first glance there was nothing special, but with his transparent eye, Su Yu was shocked to find a few myriad Tau stones hidden under the ground where he had been meditating. Pow! Su Yu smashed the place with his palm and dug out 4 myriad Tau stones. The myriad Tau stones were left by Dan Haiqing? Qin Hui was stunned. Is he that kind? Her intuition told her that Dan Haiqing was not such a pure and kind person. Su Yu fixed his eyes on it and said in a low voice, These 4 myriad Tau stones seem to have been burned by an unknown flame. He had a bad feeling. After thinking for a while, he raised his hand and threw it into the void. At the same time, he changed the direction of the meteorite and fled in the opposite direction. Master, we have deviated from the way back, Qin Hui reminded him. Su Yu said, If we don't deviate, I'm afraid we won't be able to go back. He had mastered the fate law and had a better sense of danger than ordinary people. At this moment, his heart was heavy, indicating that danger was coming. Oh, then we will listen to Master. Before Qin Hui could finish her sentence, a pitch-black fog that covered the sky floated over from the void behind them. The fog was like a tsunami, engulfing the nebula and tearing the void apart. The aura was extremely shocking. Qin Hui's eyes widened. She had only seen such a monstrous power when Xie Sanren attacked. Run! Qin Hui shouted. However, the black fog was too fast. In an instant, it had covered a large area of the void. Dan Haiqing, who had fled to a faraway place, was not spared and was enveloped by the black fog. Being in the black fog, the group suddenly lost their direction. Whether it was their senses or their souls, they were all plunged into pitch-black darkness, unable to distinguish the direction. Dan Haiqing's heart skipped a beat. He cunningly restrained his breath and fluctuations and hid himself. His heart was beating like a drum, and he thought to himself, "It's okay. That unparalleled expert should have caught up with Su Yu and the others." While this thought was still lingering in his mind, a warm and moist breeze blew into his ear. "I found you!" Dan Haiqing's whole body trembled, and he tried to escape subconsciously. However, as soon as he moved, he fell down stiffly, and black poisonous blood flowed out of his ears. With just a breath, Dan Haiqing was put down, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. In the darkness, Madame Du Ming, who was dressed in an enchanting red dress, covered her mouth seductively. "What should I do with you?" Chapter 2407. In the darkness, the sense of crisis in Su Yu's heart grew stronger and stronger. He used his transparent eye and found that it was the only eye that was not affected. He looked around and his pupils shrank. His heart raced. An extremely enchanting face was just 3 inches away from him. The sudden discovery of the human face gave Su Yu a fright. If not for his extraordinary composure, he would have screamed. The human face opened its mouth and slowly exhaled a breath towards Su Yu. Su Yu reacted quickly. Without thinking, he took out the insect ancestor's finger and used a drop of the insect ancestor's blood to crush it. A finger that could destroy the heavens appeared abruptly and bombarded the figure that was just inches away. The figure was caught off guard and could only let out a rough male cry before he was blown away by the finger. If it was an ordinary strong man, even a middle-stage great venerable, he would have been turned into ashes. However, the strange enchanting figure in front of him did not die. A large amount of poisonous gas spurted out of his body, and he was blown away to a faraway place. Su Yu took a deep breath. What kind of cultivation was this? A late-stage great venerable? Thinking of this, his scalp went numb. He urged the meteorite to escape frantically. With the transparent eye, Su Yu could see the direction and quickly left the darkness. "All of you, retract your auras and hide in the meteorite," Su Yu shouted. How could they compete with a strong man of the great venerable realm? He still had a drop of the insect ancestor's blood, which could activate the ancestral dragon's bizarre feather once. However, that was a life-saving item. It would not be used easily until the last moment. Emo Qingdao snorted. "What bad luck! I can't believe we ran into that damned transvestite." It was obvious that Emo Qingdao recognized who the face belonged to. "Don't worry. As long as you hide your aura, I have a way to prevent that damned transvestite from finding us." Emo Qingdao's face was cold. The group immediately entered the meteorite and hid their auras. Emo Qingdao silently recited a spell and performed a secret demonic technique that consumed a lot of the Path Master's strength. The surface of the meteorite naturally condensed a layer of weak airflow. Under the cover of the airflow, their life auras disappeared without a trace. No matter how powerful the soul strength was, it would not be able to find the people inside the meteorite. Boom! Half a cup of tea later. The void they were in suddenly darkened, shrouded by a boundless black mist. Madame Poison Fate had caught up. The darkness was deathly silent, but Su Yu could feel that there was a black shadow constantly searching in the darkness. Su Yu and the others held their breaths and remained motionless. They didn't even dare to look outside to avoid being detected. 1 day passed. However, they felt as if an entire month had passed, and it was extremely depressing. Right at that moment, the meteorite they were on slightly sank. This slight change could be ignored, but everyone's hearts were in their throats. Someone had landed on their meteorite. How dare you hurt my peerless beauty? Human, I want you to compensate me. Madame Poison Fate's face was slightly distorted. She was flustered and exasperated as she said, I know you are hiding nearby. Don't get lucky. Come out and I can spare your life. Otherwise, humph, he stomped down, and the entire meteorite trembled. The cracking sounds spread across half of the meteorite. If she had used a little more force, the meteorite would have been shattered and they would have been exposed. At that moment, Qin Hui almost cried out in fear. Her heart was about to jump out of her throat. Fortunately, Madame Poison Fate jumped to other meteorites to search. One by one, she did not give up. It was not until 3 days later that Madame Poison Fate gave up reluctantly. Humph! You are ruthless. You actually managed to escape my detection. I warn you, never step into the East Pole Market again. Otherwise, don't even think about leaving alive. When she finished speaking, she left. The pitch-black mist quickly receded like a tide. A day later, after confirming that there were no more movements outside, Qin Hui heaved a sigh of relief. She was about to speak, but Suyu reached out and covered her mouth, gesturing for her to keep quiet. Qin Hui was stunned. She did not understand what Suyu meant. A day later, one of the meteors near them suddenly exploded from the inside out. An enchanting figure flew out with a gloomy face. She looked around coldly. Did they really escape from me? What a waste of my time. With a whooshing sound, the enchanting figure broke through the air and disappeared into the boundless void. Qin Hui was scared half to death. The other party had not left. What she had said earlier was to confuse them. Fortunately, Suyu was quick-witted and had seen through the other party's tracks. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. She was about to compliment Suyu when the other party covered her mouth again and shook his head, indicating that she should not make any noise. Qin Hui's heart trembled. It can't be. Has the other party not left yet? As soon as she had this thought, an angry shout came from the opposite direction from where Madame Poison Fate had left. It turned out that she had made a detour to the back of the area. She snorted angrily. He really hasn't left. Qin Hui's gaze towards Suyu was filled with admiration. The enemy's every move was within Suyu's expectations. No matter how cunning the enemy was, they could not compare to Suyu's foresight. However, before Qin Hui could rejoice, the communication jade on her waist suddenly vibrated. She looked down subconsciously and saw that it was a message from Dan Haiqing. This guy. Qin Hui thought to herself. All of a sudden, she shivered. This was the short-distance jade transmission device of the East Region Divine Manor. It would only work if Dan Haiqing was within 100 million miles of it. However, Dan Haiqing was already many galaxies away from them. Unless, thinking of this, she felt a chill run down her spine. It was as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. At that moment, an evil laugh sounded above their heads. The game of hiding is over. Madame Poison Fate held the 180 communication jade pieces in Dan Haiqing's hand. All the jade pieces were activated. One of the jade pieces was dark red in color. The waves it released were constantly transmitted to the bottom of the meteorite. Qin Hui's face turned pale. All their efforts were in vain. Boom! A heaven-shattering force came from above their head. The whole meteorite was completely torn apart and they were all blasted out of it. Suyu's eyes were solemn. The ancestral dragon feathers fluttered gently in his sleeves, and a drop of ancestral blood was secretly prepared. There was no other way. The last drop of essence blood had to be used here. Madame Poison Fate played with her hair coquettishly. She calmed the anger on her face and pretended to be elegant. However, her voice could not hide the roughness of a man. Impressive. I was almost fooled by you. Her almond-shaped eyes were sizing Suyu up. It was just a cursory glance. Unexpectedly, she fixed her gaze on Suyu. Her eyes were sparkling and overflowing with charm. She was attracted by Suyu's unusually handsome appearance. Chapter 2408. Su Yu's nerves were tense. If he had no other choice, he would have to use the ancestral dragon's strange feathers. A man like Jade, a gentleman unparalleled in this world. Unexpectedly, not only did Madame Poison Fate not make a move, she even took out a handkerchief and covered half of her face. She said shyly and timidly, "Young master, do you believe in love at first sight?" Qin Hui and Mo Qinglong were stunned, and they looked at Su Yu with a strange gaze. Could it be that Madame Poison Life? Su Yu's hair stood on end, and his whole body shivered. "I don't believe you." Being asked by an androgynous person whether he believed in love at first sight, how could he dare to say that he believed in it? "I believe you." Madame Poison Life walked over and puffed out her chest. "Touch me if you don't believe me. My heart is beating wildly, my emotions are like the waves of the ocean, my love is like the setting sun, my blood is warm, Su Yu could not help but take a step back and said, "Stop. My sexual orientation is normal, sorry." Pucci. Although Mo Qinglong knew that this was a very serious moment and he shouldn't be laughing, he still couldn't help but laugh. She already knew what kind of person Madame Poison was. Madame Poison was supposed to be a man, but she treated herself as a woman. However, he had never expected that Madame Poisonous Life would take a liking to Su Yu, and it seemed like she really liked him. Madame Poison Life's eyes were misty as she said in an aggrieved tone, "Am I not beautiful? Or do you think that my figure is not graceful enough to move the young master's heart?" The corners of Su Yu's eyes twitched. "Is this the main point?" After taking a deep breath, Su Yu said, "Elder, if you have something to say, please speak frankly." He really did not want to be entangled with Madame Poison Life any longer. Madame Poison Fate shyly lowered her head and said in a voice as soft as a mosquito, "Young master, you stand out from the crowd and are peerless in the world. I have a peerless beauty and elegance. You and I are fated to be together. Why don't you follow me back to the East Pole Market and live happily ever after as a pair of immortal companions? Who would want to be a celestial couple with someone who was neither male nor female?" Su Yu rejected him verbally. "Senior, I already have a family. It doesn't matter. You can just kill them," Madame Poison said. "Similarly, I will also kill my harem." She gazed at Su Yu affectionately. "There are 3,000 people in the harem, but I only love you." Scram! Finally, Su Yu could not bear it any longer and cursed. After being repeatedly teased by gay people, his bottom line finally couldn't take it anymore. Madame Poison Fate was still affectionate. "Lang Jun, you look so handsome when you're angry. I love you so much." After saying that, she pounced forward, wanting to throw herself into his bosom. How could Su Yu resist a strong man of the later stage of the great venerable realm? He couldn't even dodge it. Feeling helpless, he prepared to activate the ancestral dragon's feathers. Who would have thought that 2 drops of the insect ancestor's blood essence would be wasted on a person who was neither male nor female? This was really, however, right at this moment, a burning aura suddenly appeared. It was accompanied by a scorching heat. The temperature rose rapidly. Before Su Yu and the others could understand what was going on, Madame Poisonous Life turned around abruptly, her expression changing drastically. Destructive light ripples. Damn it, why did he appear at this time? What? Qin Hui's expression changed drastically. The reason why the eastern region was so desolate and silent was because of the destructive light that could appear at any time. Every time it appeared, it would annihilate all living beings within its range. Over time, the depths of the eastern region became lifeless. Only the East Pole Market itself could resist the mysterious light ripples. Now, they were not far from the depths of the eastern region, nor were they far from the East Pole Market. At this moment, the destructive light ripples arrived. Our luck is really unparalleled. Mo Qinglong's eyes widened. Although the destructive light ripples were irregular, they would only appear once in 100 years. Now they had coincidentally encountered it. Madame Poisonous Life's eyes flickered violently, her expression filled with despair. Under the destructive light ripples, even a great venerable like her could not escape death. Su Yu's expression changed drastically. There's no other way. He finally chose to use the ancestral dragon's feathers. However, at this moment, a pearl in Su Yu's body suddenly throbbed without warning. The greedy Wolf King's lucky pearl? Su Yu was startled. He had almost forgotten that the pearl was in his body. At this critical moment it suddenly throbbed. Just as he was feeling bewildered, an incomparably pure and holy ball of light rushed out from the raging flames. The mass of light was like a bolt of lightning. It stopped in front of Su Yu and revealed itself. Looking at it, Su Yu could not help but be shocked. The divine deer of light? The divine deer of the western region's colored glaze civilization's palace of light? The divine deer of light had been massacred by the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. Su Yu had thought that the deer had died. Not only was it not dead, but it had also appeared in the distant depths of the eastern region? Had it come here alone, or had someone led it here? Even more coincidentally, it had been summoned here by the lucky pearl. As usual, the divine deer of light rubbed against Su Yu's palm intimately. Su Yu did not know whether to laugh or cry. In the face of great danger, it was still in the mood to be intimate? Fine, I'll bring you along, Su Yu said. However, the divine deer of light blinked its bright eyes and took a few steps to the side. It then stopped and looked at Su Yu. After a few more steps, it stopped and let out a cry. You want me to follow you? Su Yu asked suspiciously. The divine deer of light nodded. Su Yu was surprised. The destructive light ripples were coming. Could it be that the divine deer of light knew a safe place? Time was of the essence, and Su Yu had no time to think. He said, "Follow it." The three of them immediately set off to follow. Madame Du Ming pondered for a moment, then followed them. At that moment, the temperature of the world rose even more violently. The entire void was as hot as a sea of fire, and it was suffocating. However, this was only a sign of the arrival of the destructive light ripples. The real destructive light ripples were still at the East Pole Market. If they really reached that place, it would be a scene of destruction that would burn the sky and boil the sea. The group of people followed the divine deer of light all the way. Half a day later, the whole world had turned dark red. The civilizations were scorched red by the high temperature, like charcoal that had been thoroughly burned. Under such terrible heat, any path master below the celestial realm would undoubtedly die. However, the divine deer of light did not stop. Finally, another half a day later, the whole void began to boil, and the terrible heat waves came rushing over. Su Yu had no choice but to activate the heavenly dragon body. Even so, it was extremely difficult to resist. The cold energy in his body was completely useless, and he felt a deep burning pain all over his body. He looked at Qin Hui again, and her expression was one of extreme agony. Another half a day later, Su Yu's whole body was festering from the heat, and his soul was in unbearable pain. The desolate power in his body was in chaos because of the terrible heat, and he could no longer fly. He was gradually unable to keep up with the divine deer of light. He had reached his limit. At that moment, the void was like a furnace. Chapter 2409. It was only a matter of time before it reached them. At that moment, the light divine deer turned its head and shot a milky white light at Su Yu and Qin Hui. The two of them felt a cooling sensation, and the burning pain quickly receded. Su Yu thanked it and chased after it again. In the last half of the day, the strange high temperature made Madame Poison Life groan in pain. "Evil creature, where are you taking us?" There were many red spots on her body. Even she could not withstand the high temperature at the moment. Just as she was cursing, Madame Poison Life seemed to notice something and stared in front of the light divine deer. An ancient Taoist temple was floating in the void. Qin Hui and Emo Qinglong were surprised. Why is there a Taoist temple here? Without the protection of civilization, how could a dilapidated Taoist temple withstand the invasion of the power of nothingness? No matter what, The light divine deer must have known that the Taoist temple could protect them from the danger of the power of nothingness. However, the destructive wave of light also arrived unexpectedly. The destructive light seemed to be far away, but it swept over in the blink of an eye. The light divine deer let out a hurried cry and flew into the Taoist temple. Suyu could not avoid it in time. He used the space realm and brought Emo Qinglong and Qin Hui with him. Just as it arrived, the space domain that he didn't even have time to withdraw was burned into nothingness. As the realm was destroyed, Suyu, who was its master, was mentally injured. He could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood, his face as pale as a sheet. However, what was worth rejoicing was that the Taoist temple could really resist the destructive light. Looking up, the sky above the Taoist temple was covered by the destructive light, destroying the void. Nothing could survive under the extreme heat. However, the inside of the Taoist temple was cool, without the slightest sense of heat. The entire Taoist temple was extremely calm amidst the raging waves of light, like a divine pearl that stabilized the sea. It was a blessing in disguise. However, Madame Poison Life was not so lucky. Because of her hesitation, she had been following the light divine deer from afar. Unable to return to the Taoist temple in time, she was instantly engulfed by the destructive light. Outside the Taoist temple, heart-wrenching screams could be heard. Just as Su Yu and the others guessed that Madame Poison Life had been killed by the destructive light, a cloud of black poisonous fog suddenly erupted. The poisonous fog stubbornly penetrated the destructive light and reached the sky above the Taoist temple. A charred figure fell from the poisonous fog and smashed into the courtyard of the Taoist temple. Cough, 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 cough. Charcoal struggled to get up. The burns on his body were recovering with great difficulty. Qin Hui fiercely swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He didn't die even after that. Madame Poison Life's life was too great. Su Yu's eyes flickered. Madame Poison Life's injuries were grave, and her cultivation had dropped greatly. So, if she wanted to kill her, this would be the best time. Whoosh, he was still considering whether he should make a move or not, but Emo Qingdao had already acted decisively. Her vision darkened as she shot out 2 black arrows, aiming for the space between Madame Poison Life's eyebrows. Madame Poison opened her eyes weakly. She wanted to hide, but she could not. This was an attack from a great venerate. If Madame Poison Life was unable to resist, she would most likely die. However, at this moment there was a ding. An inexplicable mighty force blocked in front of Madame Poison Life, turning the 2 arrows into nothingness. When it is possible to let someone off, one should spare them. A majestic and faintly discernible old voice resounded in the sky above the Taoist temple. Following that, a scene that caused everyone to gasp in shock appeared. A giant hand that blotted out the sky suddenly cut through the void and slapped the destructive waves of light back. The destructive waves of light that filled the sky dissipated completely. The blazing void also gradually cooled down, returning to normal. Emo Qingdao gasped. Dispelling 2 of her arrows was nothing. At most, it was someone with a cultivation similar to hers. However, to destroy the destructive waves of light that were wreaking havoc in the depths of the East region was too terrifying. Even the palace master of the mysterious Dao Palace might not have such unparalleled magical powers. I am enlightened, Emo Qingdao immediately said sincerely, her heart thumping wildly. Go back to where you came from. The voice drifted over. Su Yu, Emo Qingdao, and Qin Hui felt the world spin. When they stabilized themselves, they were shocked to find that they had returned to the vicinity of the East region divine manor. Su Yu's pupils shrank. He could easily cross half of the East region when he used the ancestral dragon's strange feathers. However, it was absolutely impossible for it to send someone so far away through space. Emo Qingdao could not help but gasp. What kind of existence is the owner of the Taoist temple? His. Only Su Yu knew that it was an ancient existence comparable to the insect ancestor. However, why did that Taoist temple look so familiar? Did he hear that voice somewhere before? A strange thought flashed across Su Yu's mind. In the Taoist temple far away, a haggard old Taoist priest appeared in the courtyard with his hands clasped behind his back. He exuded an aura that transcended the past and the present. Madame Poison Life, who was at the later stage of the great venerable realm, was instantly overwhelmed by the aura and vomited blood, fainting on the spot. The old Taoist priest looked at the radiant white deer and said reproachfully, "You, why did you bring the holy mortal body here?" The radiant divine deer let out a crisp cry and tugged at the old Taoist's sleeves coquettishly. The old Taoist priest said calmly, "It's not that I don't want to help, but I can't afford to. The holy mortal body and the holy mountain emperor have always been at odds. An old bag of bones like me has no right to intervene in their affairs." The radiant divine deer's eyes were dim, and she turned unhappily on the spot. The old Taoist priest chuckled. "Although I can't help, I can still give him a way out. I hope he has a chance to rekindle the oil lamp and regain the holy mortal body." His gaze slowly turned to Madame Poison Life. With just a sweep of his eyes, Madame Poison Life's injuries healed. Then, the old Taoist priest waved his sleeves, and he, the Taoist temple, and the radiant divine deer disappeared into thin air, leaving Madame Poison Life, who was gradually regaining consciousness, lying in the void in a daze. What happened? That elder. Madame Poison Life gradually remembered, and her expression changed drastically. After a long while, she finally calmed down and murmured, "I didn't expect the unparalleled Saint Master of the early era to still be alive in the outer realm. What a surprise!" Madame Poison Life patted herself. She was in a good mood after surviving a great calamity, and she thought of Su Yu again. She turned to look at the Eastern Divine Manor and smiled shyly. "You can't run away from the man I fancy." At the same time, at the Eastern Divine Manor, Su Yu and the other two returned to the Divine Manor and slowly walked toward the place where Xie Sanren was training in isolation. Mo Qinglong was a little nervous. "Are you confident that you can get close to that man with no self?" "Of course," Su Yu said softly, but his eyes shone with an unfathomable light. Mo Qinglong was still worried. "Can you be more specific?" She couldn't figure out how they could get close to that man with no self just by completing the mission. With Xie Sanren's status, even if they completed the mission, they might not be able to get within 1,000 feet of him. Moreover, once they got close, they would have to absorb the power of Xian Dao Master from that man without alerting Xie Sanren. Chapter 24:10. Unfortunately, Su Yu only smiled without saying a word. He had no intention of telling her. "You!" Mo Qinglong pinched him. As the number one demonic cultivator in the north, when had she ever been kept in the dark? Su Yu was the only one who made her go crazy. The three of them laughed as they finally arrived at the world within a black tree in the center of the East Region Divine Manor. The weight of the evil energy in this world was no less than that of the Dragon Wood. Su Yu and the others had to resist it with all their might. "Who are you?" A stern voice boomed like thunder, reverberating in everyone's ears. In this world there was a golden giant lying on the ground. His entire body shone with a golden light, as if he were made of gold. He emitted an awe-inspiring aura. A middle-stage great venerable half-human puppet? Mo Qinglong was shocked. Su Yu's eyes glinted. He did not know how many great venerable half-human puppets Xie Sanren had. It was even possible that there were late-stage great venerable half-human puppet. Qin Hui immediately said, "We are here to return the mission Xie Sanren gave us." Only then did the golden figure slowly retract his golden light, his powerful aura receding like the tide. His huge body moved to the side, revealing an ancient purple tree behind him. On the treetop sat an old man shrouded in evil energy. It was Xie Sanren. "Greetings, Xie Sanren." Qin Hui bowed, her face full of respect. Xie Sanren slowly opened his old eyes and said, "Where is the myriad Tao stone?" Qin Hui took out a space storage device, but it was taken away by him. Looking inside, CS Sanren said slowly, "Why is there only half?" Reporting to CS Sanren, Dan Haiqing is in charge of the other half, but for some reason he has not returned, Qin Hui said. CS Sanren nodded slowly and waved his sleeves. "What reward do you want?" Qin Hui was delighted. She had expected that she would be rewarded if she could successfully bring back the myriad Tao stone that CS Sanren needed. After all, this was a mission personally given by CS Sanren. She wondered if she could get another chance at the Dragonwood. Perhaps it could help her cultivation level improve. But Su Yu had already said, "Our teacher hopes to pay tribute to the selfless being of the Xian Dao Palace." What? Qin Hui was almost scared out of her wits. That selfless being was a taboo existence. Under normal circumstances, no one dared to mention him. What would the CS Sanren think if Su Yu suddenly revealed his identity and requested to meet him? He would definitely be angry, right? Mo Qingdao was dumbfounded. Was this the 90% certainty that Su Yu had mentioned? She could not believe that Su Yu would be so naive as to think that he would receive such a reward from CS Sanren just by completing a mission. To someone as high and mighty as CS Sanren, Su Yu and the others were merely ants. Wasn't it only right for an ant to complete a mission for him? The reward was just a symbolic one. But what Su Yu wanted would touch on CS Sanren's secrets. How could he tolerate that? Sure. However, what shocked Qin Hui and Mo Qinglong was that the evil Sanren actually agreed. He nodded and slowly said, "Your mission concerns this old man's life and death. I can agree to your request. Follow me." Evil Sanren slowly stood up and walked towards the end of the world. Mo Qinglong blinked. That's it? She had a surreal feeling. How could she meet the taboo selfless being so easily? After a moment of shock, she could not help but sigh. If I had known it would be so easy, why would I have waited until now? To meet CS Sanren as long as she performed a meritorious deed, it was too easy for her. Su Yu chuckled. His chuckle contained an unfathomable meaning. After half a cup of tea's time, the group had arrived at a chaotic land. What they could see was a field of interweaving colorful thunderbolt. Amidst the flickering thunderbolts, 100-foot lake appeared before their eyes. CS Sanren stopped in front of the lake, quietly staring at it. Qin Hui was shocked. Could the selfless being be hiding within the lake? Only Su Yu and Mo Qinglong stared at the lake in shock. The water of the lake looked normal, even a little murky. But under their gazes, they could see that the water was moving. The entire lake was filled with living things. "It's not hiding," CS Sanren said slowly. "The lake is the selfless being." What? Qin Hui was shocked. The legendary taboo being, the selfless being, was actually a puddle of water? CS Sanren, what's going on? Qin Hui asked. However, CS Sanren slowly turned around and glanced at Qin Hui before turning to look at Su Yu. To be precise, he was looking at Mo Qinglong, who was behind Su Yu. "Rather than saying that I'm answering Qin Hui, I'm actually answering you, right? The demon master of the north, Mo Qinglong?" Hearing that, Mo Qinglong said fearfully, "CS Sanren, you've misunderstood. I'm little demon Su, not Mo Qinglong." CS Sanren slowly released the powerful cultivation of a late-stage Great Venerable. Qin Hui was the first to bear the brunt of the pressure. Unable to withstand the powerful pressure, she knelt on the ground with a thud, her Taoist blood spurting out of her body. The same pressure descended upon Mo Qinglong and Su Yu. Mo Qinglong secretly clenched his teeth, trying to resist it. But as the pressure grew stronger, it threatened his life. He had no choice but to release a demonic light ball to block the pressure. Only then did CS Sanren let out a hoarse laugh, retracting his aura and pressure. Rumor has it that Mo Qinglong has mastered the ancient cultivation technique, the eternal demon heart. Every time he dies, he will be reborn in his previous body. So it's true. CS Sanren chuckled. Emo Qinglong's eyes were cold. Not only did his demonic energy not weaken, but it continued to rise. Since his identity had been seen through, there was no need to hide it anymore. In fact, it was time to consider how to survive. Based on her understanding of Xie Sanren, he was not a pushover. Stop it. However, it was Su Yu who stopped her. If Xie Sanren really wanted to harm you, he would have done so long ago. Why would he wait until now? Emo Qinglong's eyes flashed. What do you mean? I mean, your identity has long been suspected by Xie Sanren, Su Yu said. When? It was probably at the evil venerable cemetery. I think he recognized you the moment he laid eyes on you, Su Yu said calmly, as if he had already known about it. Emo Qinglong raised her eyes in surprise and looked at Xie Sanren. Xie Sanren nodded with a faint smile, agreeing with Su Yu's guess. How could a late-stage great venerable be deceived so easily? Su Yu had thought Emo Qinglong was very suspicious the moment he saw her. He had guessed most of her identity, but he had not said anything. If you knew, why didn't you tell me? Emo Qinglong glared at Su Yu, feeling like he had been deceived. Su Yu said calmly, If I had told you, would you still dare to stand in front of Xie Sanren? Chapter 24:11. Are you crazy? You knew I was injured, yet you sent me to the Xie Sanren. Emo Qinglong thought. She even suspected that Su Yu had betrayed her. You're not the only one injured, Su Yu said pointedly. Emo Qinglong came back to his senses. His gaze flickered between Xie Sanren and Su Yu as he asked, What is going on? Su Yu said, It's simple. The Xie Sanren tried to find out your identity, and I took advantage of the situation to let the two of you meet. After all, he was an old monster who had lived for more than half a century. He only needed a reminder to understand what was going on. The Xie Sanren had intentionally assigned the Azure Dragon Group to the task of finding the Myriad Tau Stone. How could he give such an important task to the Azure Dragon Group, which had been lagging behind for a long time? He had assigned the Azure Dragon Group because he was certain that the young lady was Emo Qinglong. Hence, he had wanted to test her. If she really was Emo Qinglong, he would definitely be able to complete the task. Now, as expected, he had found out. Su Yu, don't you know how dangerous this is? Emo Qinglong said angrily. Rashly letting the two domain masters meet would put their lives in danger if they were not careful. Don't worry. The Xie Sanren spent so much effort to test you, he definitely wants to talk to you. Hence, I took the opportunity to let the two of you meet, Su Yu said slowly. Emo Qinglong already knew what was going on, but he could not help but hate Su Yu for hiding it from him. I'll count myself in sooner or later, Emo Qinglong said, turning to look at the Xie Sanren. Tell me, why are you looking for me? The Xie Sanren laughed hoarsely. To get what we need, of course. Emo Qinglong's eyes flashed. What do I need, and what do you need? We need the same thing. The Xie Sanren's eyes flashed. The consciousness of the selfless man, eh? Emo Qinglong's eyes narrowed as he stared at the lake. What's wrong with the consciousness of the selfless man? The Xie Sanren waved his sleeves, and the lake water formed a human figure. His entire body was lifelike, but his eyes were dull. Finally, Su Yu and the others felt that something was wrong. But according to the rumors, this selfless being is extremely powerful. He has the ability to suppress the entire Evil Lord Cemetery. Why can't I feel any pressure from him? Qin Hui looked at the selfless being in shock. Evil Sanren said lightly, because it has already lost its consciousness. The selfless person only had one consciousness, and that was to suppress the evil Reverend Cemetery. Rather than saying that he had lost his consciousness, it would be more accurate to say that he had lost the only trace of his soul. If that's the case, doesn't that mean that once something happens to the evil Reverend Cemetery, no one will be able to suppress it in time? Xie San loosened his hand, and the selfless being turned back into a lake. He said, One day, I suddenly realized that the selfless being had turned into a lake. His consciousness had already left, and I don't know where it went. A selfless person without any consciousness, all of the profound way energy in his body was restrained and not released. Wanting to use it to remove the dragon monarch mark on his body would only become empty talk. Man proposes, God disposes. Emo Qingdao let out a long sigh. He had racked his brains, but in the end it was all for naught. Could it be that he really had to submit to fate and allow the dragon monarch to take away his lifespan? As expected, Suyu said slowly. The fact that the selfless being had not appeared despite the changes in the evil Reverend Cemetery showed that something must have happened to him. Suyu was not surprised by the current situation. Where is his consciousness? Suyu's gaze was deep and resolute. He had been through countless desperate situations in his life. If he had not given up at the last moment, he would not be the Suyu he was now. Xie-san looked at Suyu with a profound look. He was a little puzzled. Why was it that between Emo Qingdao and this little human, the human was the leader? In the divine dragon battlefield. Hearing that, Suyu and Emo Qingdao were both stunned. Where? Emo Qingdao repeated with a look of disbelief on his face. Xie-san said, the divine dragon battlefield. Having received a definite answer, Emo Qingdao's expression kept changing. Finally, she looked up to the sky and bellowed, "Damned heavens, are you playing with me?" In the end, the selfless being that she had been searching for so long was actually right there. It was laughable that she had worked so hard to travel from the divine dragon battlefield to the depths of the eastern region, but in the end Suyu felt a deep sense of grievance. Wasn't this too much of a prank? How about it? Do you have the guts to make a trip to the divine dragon battlefield and find the selfless being's consciousness? Xie-san asked. Emo Qingdao pondered for a long time, then slowly said, "To tell you the truth, we came from the divine dragon battlefield. Now that things had come to this, there was no point in hiding it anymore." She gave him a brief summary of what had happened. Hearing that, Xie-san did not know whether to laugh or cry. "If that's the case, you did come here for nothing. So, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I can't help you," Emo Qingdao said slowly. "They had the mark of the Dragon Emperor on them. If they went to the southern region, the Dragon Emperor would definitely notice and intercept them. Haha, perhaps because of that, you can help me even more." Xie-san smiled mysteriously. Emo Qingdao frowned. "What do you mean?" "Haha, come with me." The evil energy under Xie-san's feet trembled, and he brought the three of them to an ancient stone plate. The stone plate was carved with extremely ancient words. Even Suyu could not recognize which clan's language it belonged to. "This is a funerary object that I accidentally found in a tomb. Its function is transportation. It can transport a person a whole region away in a single breath." Hearing that, Emo Qingdao's eyes were filled with desire. She had long heard that there was a very mysterious transportation method in the previous era. The distance of the transportation was a whole region's length. Unfortunately, it had been lost. She did not expect Xie-san to get his hands on one. "When the Dragon Emperor follows the mark on your bodies to where I am, I will activate the transportation portal and send you to the Divine Dragon battlefield. Meanwhile, I will think of a way to stall the Dragon Emperor to buy you enough time," Xie-san said, stroking his beard. Emo Qingdao's eyes lit up, but then he shook his head. His expression was very serious. "I'm afraid you still do not know the Dragon Emperor's true strength. Based on my guess, he has already reached the level of Xian Dao Master. He is not someone you can fight. If they were to really fight, the Dragon Emperor would be able to kill Xie-sanren with just a glance. He could then snatch the stone plate and use it to transport back to the Dragon Clan of the southern region, catching Suyu and Emo Qingdao red-handed." Unexpectedly, Xie-san was not afraid. Instead, he laughed sinisterly. "Xian Dao Master? Haha, I would like to try and see if my many years of experience are enough to compete with Xian Dao Master." He lightly stomped the ground, and a tenjong-wide fissure appeared under his feet. Looking into the crack, he saw thousands of half-life puppets standing upright in the depths of the ground. Each half-living puppet's cultivation level was at the early stage of the Great Venerable Realm. Among them, there were even a few mid-stage Great Venerable Realm half-living puppet. Seeing this, Mo Qingdao gasped. His scalp was extremely numb. When he looked at Xie San again, Mo Qingdao's eyes were filled with deep fear. Chapter 24:12. If that's the case, we can rest assured. Mo Qinglong forced himself to remain calm. Xie Sanren nodded. Then, just stay here until the Dragon Emperor arrives at the East Divine Palace. When the time is right, I will send you to the Dragon God battlefield and tell you where the consciousness of the person without me is hiding. With that, the three of them bid farewell. The evil Sanren watched them leave. His eyes flickered, and there was a strange light in them. Upon returning to the Azure Dragon civilization, Mo Qingdao immediately set up an isolation spell around him. He asked, Su Yu, what do you think? His voice was hurried, and one could vaguely hear the restlessness in his heart. This person cannot be trusted, Su Yu said simply and forcefully. Mo Qinglong had a rare serious expression on his face. He possesses the power to unify the outer realms, yet he hibernates for tens of thousands of years without making a sound. This kind of person's schemes are too great. The two of them had the same thought. If Fei Xie didn't show them, they wouldn't believe that he had 1,000 puppets at the Grand Monarch level. Who could stop such a powerful force that could sweep through the outer realms? The 9 great 7-star civilizations of the Western region? Northern region Fiend Dao? Southern region Dragon Clan? No one could stop him. However, the evil Sanren had not made a move yet. It was obvious that his scheme was even more terrifying than the entire outer realm. How could he believe a single word of this person's words? Be prepared. The trip to the Divine Dragon battlefield will not be as easy as you imagine, Mo Qinglong said slowly. Su Yu nodded slightly. The plan was set, and Su Yu and Mo Qingdao were safe for the time being. Su Yu relaxed and started to comprehend the 9-5 supremacy technique with all his might. However, his suspicions had already been raised and he didn't dare to allow anyone to spy on him. When he was comprehending, he had to set up layers of isolation around him. Only then could he be at ease. With the help of the diluted ancient god's blood, Su Yu's comprehension improved by leaps and bounds. The connection between him and the royal scepter dragon sword became more and more intense. He believed that it wouldn't be long before he would be able to completely cultivate the 9-5 exalted technique. At that time, he would definitely be able to give the Dragon Monarch a pleasant surprise. At the same time, Qin Hui made use of her identity in the East Region Divine Manor to help Su Yu with another matter, to investigate the whereabouts of the Great Divine Throne of Heaven and Earth. The news of the God of Heaven and Earth appearing in the Eastern region had already spread throughout the 4 major regions. Now that Su Yu was in the East region, he naturally had to take action. Time flowed like water. Half a year later, the Royal Scepter Dragon Sword was floating in front of Su Yu's chest, and waves of pressure that could command the world were slowly released. This pressure had no effect on other living beings. However, it had absolute suppression over the Dragon Clan. Even Su Yu, who had the bloodline of the Dragon Clan, felt a great sense of heaviness, which made it difficult for him to raise his head and look at the Royal Scepter Dragon Sword. One could imagine what would happen to a real dragon in front of the revered dragon sword. I've already cultivated more than half of it. In another year's time, I'll be able to successfully cultivate it. Su Yu's eyes shone brightly. The good news was that after half a year of recuperation, Mo Qingdao's injuries had healed quite a bit. Its strength had already recovered to the level of the Howling Firmament Wolf Lord. If he were to fight against a mid-stage Great Venerable like Rotten Bones, he should be able to kill him easily. However, just as Su Yu was about to continue, the jade talisman on his waist rang. He looked down and saw that it was a message from Qin Hui. Su Yu was delighted. Could it be that there was news from the heavenly divine throne? However, when he opened the message, Su Yu's expression immediately turned cold. Master, come quickly. The information regarding the heaven and earth god throne has been stolen by Zi Xiaoyun. Zi Xiaoyun? The last time Zi Xiaoyun and Dan Haiqing had come to the Azure Dragon civilization to cause trouble, he had not yet pursued the matter. In the end, Zi Xiaoyun had acted recklessly and dared to obstruct his search for the heaven and earth god throne. The heaven and earth god throne was the key to his breakthrough to become a path master. How could he allow it to be destroyed? Creak. Su Yu immediately stopped cultivating, left the stone door, and headed straight for where Qin Hui was. She was at the border of the East Domain. While Su Yu was in seclusion, a new round of annual training began. He and Mo Qingdao had reached a certain level of tacit understanding with Xie Sanren, so they did not need to participate. Qin Hui took advantage of the training to inquire about the heaven and earth god throne. In the end, she was lucky enough to obtain top-secret information. It was the latest news about the heaven and earth god throne. Unexpectedly, before she could obtain the information, Zi Xiaoyun had snatched it away. A few days later, at the border of the East Domain and the South Domain, from afar, a civilization could be seen quietly. That was the camp of the teachers and students for the training. In the center of the camp, Qin Hui and the others were confronting a large number of teachers and students. Not only did the opponent have Zi Xiaoyun, but they also had the Kylan group, the Sea Beast group, and other high-ranking group. The Azure Dragon group was isolated and helpless, confronting them from afar. Apart from Su Ming, everyone else in the group was more or less injured. Among them, Qin Hui's injuries were the most serious. There were signs of battle all around, and the situation was very tense. Zi Xiaoyun, don't go too far. Qin Hui's eyes were filled with deep anger. Not only had Zi Xiaoyun stolen the information, but he had also gathered a group of teachers and students to slander the Azure Dragon group, saying that they had ambushed and injured Zi Xiaoyun's favorite disciple, Tu Yihai. But when the truth came out, Tu Yihai had led a group of students from the Kylan group to openly attack Su Ming and another student, robbing them of the demonic beasts that they were about to obtain. A fierce battle had broken out between the two. The Azure Dragon group should have been at a disadvantage, but somehow, Su Ming had managed to injure Tu Yihai. Then, Zi Xiaoyun had inverted right and wrong, slandering Su Ming and the other student for ambushing them. What was worse was that they had the advantage in numbers. Under such circumstances, Deacon Li, who was in charge of guarding the place, could only let them settle it privately. That was why the Azure Dragon group and several other groups were confronting each other. The result of the confrontation was, of course, very disadvantageous to the Azure Dragon group. Apart from Su Ming, who was relatively young and was protected by them, the rest of them had varying degrees of injuries. Zi Xiaoyun's gaze was calm as he snorted coldly. The Azure Dragon group only has itself to blame. You should have been training properly, but you had to do such despicable things. That's right, Teacher Dan Haking had followed the Azure Dragon group to the East Pole Market to carry out a mission, but what happened? Only the Azure Dragon group returned, but Teacher Dan Haking and Feng Qingyang were nowhere to be found. God knows what happened to them. Is there a need to ask? Most likely, the Azure Dragon group did something secretly. Everyone spoke one after another, not concealing their hostility towards the Azure Dragon group at all. Actually, the reason was very simple. Previously, the Azure Dragon group had won first place in the training, and most of the groups were already unconvinced. But this time, the Azure Dragon group had achieved exceptionally dazzling results even though there were only 2 students, and they had directly charged into the top 5. This made them even more jealous and envious. Su Ming and the other student had obtained the first place reward previously, and their strength had improved by leaps and bounds. That was why they had today's harvest. Therefore, when Zi Xiaoyun took the lead to provoke them, they unanimously chose to stand with Zi Xiaoyun. Chapter 24:13. Qin Hui, you allowed the students to launch a sneak attack. You must give all of us an explanation, Zi Xiaoyun yelled, his voice shaking the entire civilization. His unrelenting attitude made Qin Hui and the others' expressions turn ugly. This was not going to end well. Zi Xiaoyun, you want to use this opportunity to get rid of us? Sure, come at me one by one. Let's see if my life is tougher or if you have more blood. Qin Hui, Chen Yun, and Yushan looked at each other. The three of them all had the 9-death demon heart. Even if they fought to death, they could be reborn immediately. If the three of them fought with all their might, it would be hard to say who would lose. All right, we'll come at you one by one. Zi Xiaoyun laughed sinisterly. He looked at the other teachers and students and attacked at the same time. Having suffered at Qin Hui's hands once, Zi Xiaoyun still dared to fight alone? 7 or 8 teachers swarmed forward and fought with Qin Hui and the other two. The result was obvious. Although the three of them did not die, in terms of combat power, they were no match for a group of people. On the other hand, Su Ming and another student were also ganged up on. An hour later, the battle slowly came to a halt. Qin Hui was bathed in blood, while Chen Yun and Yushan lay on the ground, barely breathing, unable to move. The other student was on the verge of death. He could only exhale, but not inhale. Su Ming was also covered in injuries, but they were very light. For some reason, his injuries had not been too serious in the past few battles. Qin Hui struggled to support herself on one knee, glaring at Zi Xiaoyun. Despicable. Zi Xiaoyun laughed evilly. Rather than saying I'm despicable, it's more accurate to say that you're too useless. He shook his palm, and a sealed superstition floated in his palm. It was the intelligence on the heavenly divine throne that Qin Hui had painstakingly obtained, but it had been snatched away by Zi Xiaoyun. This must be prepared for Su Yu, who has yet to become a path master? Zi Xiaoyun's gaze was deep. The heavenly divine throne was only useful to those who had yet to become path masters. A celestial realm path master like Qin Hui did not need the heavenly divine throne. It was obvious that it was prepared for Su Yu. Zi Xiaoyun, what do you want? Qin Hui shouted, staring at the intelligence. Zi Xiaoyun laughed. What do I want? It's very simple, kneel down and kowtow to me 100 times. He would never forget how Qin Hui had taken the opportunity to knock him unconscious when they fought in the Azure Dragon civilization. His clothes were torn, and he was lying unconscious on the ground, exposed to the eyes of others. At the thought of it, Zi Xiaoyun felt goosebumps all over his body. He wished he could kill Qin Hui on the spot to avenge himself for that day. He would have killed Qin Hui 100 times over if the Eastern Region Divine Palace had not forbade killing each other. Kneel to you. Qin Hui's eyes were filled with contempt. Do you think a loser like you is worthy of making me kneel? These words pierced Zi Xiaoyun's heart, and he gripped the report tightly. I'll give you 3 breaths of time to consider. If not, I'll crush the report. Stop! Qin Hui shouted. Zi Xiaoyun had already started counting. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3. Putong, without much hesitation or consideration, Qin Hui knelt down and kowtowed to the ground. The entire ground trembled slightly, showing how heavy that knock was. Once, twice, thrice Chen Yun and Yushan's eyes almost popped out of their socket. How was Qin Hui going to face the Eastern Region Divine Palace in the future? A teacher kowtowing to another teacher. How was she going to hold her head up high in the future? However, in order to hold on to that report, Qin Hui decisively endured the humiliation, chose to endure it, and chose to give up her dignity. Under the gloating and triumphant gazes, Qin Hui kowtowed 100 times. Her face was covered in blood, and she looked exceptionally terrifying. However, her eyes were exceptionally calm. I did it. Give me the report. Zi Xiaoyun chuckled and threw the report over. Qin Hui immediately caught it. She thought to herself, I've finally accomplished my mission and successfully obtained the report. However, the moment the report landed in her hands, a thick power of a path master overflowed from it. The report exploded into nothingness with a pop. Qin Hui stared blankly at the fragmented report. After a while, she recovered and flew into a rage. Zi Xiaoyun, are you courting death? She had already lowered her head and endured the humiliation. However, Zi Xiaoyun actually went back on his words. A boundless anger welled up from the bottom of her heart. However, Zi Xiaoyun had a playful smile on his face. I say, Qin Hui, I've given you the report. You didn't keep it well and broke it. What does that have to do with me? I, Zi Xiaoyun, am a man of my word. I never go back on my word. Qin Hui gritted her teeth and forced herself to stand up. She activated her domain and attacked. Die. She didn't dare to imagine what Su Yu would think of her now that she had lost the report that she had painstakingly obtained for half a year. At the very least, she would be judged as useless, right? Zi Xiaoyun sneered. Without thinking, he raised his hand and attacked with his doctrine artifact. Boom. With Qin Hui's current state, if she were to fight Zi Xiaoyun head-on, the result would be obvious. Her domain was shattered on the spot, and she was sent flying by the doctrine artifact. She flew out of the civilization and into the void. You overestimate yourself, haha, Zi Xiaoyun sneered. He shook his head and left with his hands behind his back, preparing to continue his training. Unexpectedly, the onlookers suddenly burst into an uproar. Zi Xiaoyun turned his head to look and couldn't help but frown. A ray of light pierced through the void and caught Qin Hui, who was flying backward. It then landed back in the civilization. The light faded, revealing Su Yu, Mo Qinglong, and Qin Hui, who was being supported. Zi Xiaoyun was all smiles. Haha, Su Yu, your teachers and students are incompetent and have been beaten up. Hurry up and help them back to rest. Don't embarrass yourself anymore. Su Yu did not say a word and asked about the details of the incident. When Chen Yun and Yushan saw Su Yu and Mo Qinglong arrive, they felt relieved. They crawled over with difficulty and told Su Yu everything that had happened. After listening to them, Su Yu's expression was still as calm as still water. He silently treated the injuries of Qin Hui and the other two. When they had recovered, he slowly raised his eyes and looked at Zi Xiaoyun. He said calmly, I can forgive you for stealing the report, and I can tolerate you slandering and bullying my teachers. However, I can't tolerate you breaking your promise after humiliating me. If Zi Xiaoyun had destroyed the report from the beginning, perhaps he wouldn't have been so angry. However, he had deliberately humiliated Qin Hui and broken his promise after the incident. This had crossed Su Yu's bottom line. No matter what, Qin Hui was one of his people. He couldn't allow an outsider to humiliate her like this. Hearing this, Zi Xiaoyun couldn't help but laugh. Haha, interesting. I thought you would leave with your tail between your legs after seeing the tragic state of the Azure Dragon group. I didn't expect you to still have the guts to want to avenge your teacher and classmates. As he spoke, Zi Xiaoyun waved his sleeves. Fine. I'll fulfill your wish. Tuihai you go. From the Qilin group, a middle-stage Celestial Realm student walked out. It was Tuihai. Remember, they are all students of the East Region Divine Palace. Be careful when you attack. Don't accidentally kill them, Zi Xiaoyun said mockingly. However, he was puzzled to find that after he said this, Qin Hui, Chen Yun, and Yushan looked at him as if they were looking at an idiot. Chapter 24:14. Zi Xiaoyun was surprised. Was there a problem with his words? Even though he was mocking Su Yu, he was not exaggerating. Tuihai was the second strongest person in the East Region Divine Manor. His cultivation level was at the middle stage of the Celestial Realm. He was not someone Feng Qingyang, who was at the early stage of the Celestial Realm. In a real fight, Feng Qingyang would definitely lose to Tuihai within 10 moves. And Su Yu was only slightly stronger than Feng Qingyang. If Tuihai were to fight Su Yu to the death, Su Yu would definitely die. He did not understand the gazes of Qin Hui and the other two. Tuihai, pretend I didn't say anything. Zi Xiaoyun grunted, thinking that Qin Hui and the rest did not know how to appreciate his kindness. Since they did not appreciate his kindness, why should he show mercy? Understood, teacher. Tuihai was tall and sturdy, his upper body bare, his entire body reflecting a metallic luster. One look was enough to tell that he had a strong physique. He threw a ferocious smile at Su Yu. If you kowtow and admit defeat now, I can spare your life. Otherwise, but he realized that Su Yu did not even look at him. His gaze was fixed on Zi Xiaoyun. Tuihai laughed angrily. You are still not serious? You really don't know how to spell death. Su Yu calmly looked at him. I don't kill innocent people, so don't give me a reason to touch you. The teachers and students burst into laughter, looking at Su Yu as if this was something new. The second strongest student in the East Region Divine Manor is being threatened right in front of his face. This is the first time something like this has happened in 1,000 years. This person must have found an indescribable confidence in Feng Qingyang. Haha, that day, Feng Qingyang did not use his full strength. Is this enough to enchant that brat surnamed Su to the point of not knowing the immensity of heaven and earth? Tuihai's eyes were filled with disdain. He extended a finger. Abilities are not something you can boast about. If you want to prove yourself, show me your full strength. Wisps of Daelord's power were slowly released from his pores and transformed into steel needles that were 10 inches long. In the blink of an eye, he had turned into a ferocious being covered in spikes. Combined with his strong physique, he would be a pain in the ass. Let me see your abilities. Tuihai let out a loud roar, then turned into a rolling mass of thorns and attacked Su Yu. Everywhere they passed, numerous holes were pierced open in the air, and they were so dense that it caused one's heart to tremble. Hiss, this is the mixed origin piercing sky technique that Tuihai is most proficient in. Under this technique, even Feng Qingyang is helpless and can only admit defeat. He attacked with his full power right from the start. I can tell that Tuihai is angry. There's going to be a good show to watch. Even if this Su guy has some ability, he's probably going to suffer. Everyone said with a look of anticipation. However, in the next moment, all the noises stopped abruptly. This was because they were all shocked by this inconceivable scene, and couldn't utter a single word. Tuihai, who was covered in spikes, suddenly stopped. It wasn't that he stopped on his own. Instead, a finger was pointed at the center of his brows, forcing him to stop. The owner of that finger was none other than Su Yu. Su Yu stood where he was and calmly stopped Tuihai's crazy attacks with a single finger. The sharp spikes on Tuihai's body were easily crushed by Su Yu's finger. They couldn't hurt him at all. Tuihai himself was extremely shocked. He couldn't believe that his all-out attack had been successfully stopped by someone else. In the next moment, Tuihai suddenly felt an endless mighty power coming from the center of his brows. Under that power, he was as small as a speck of dust, and he couldn't resist it at all. With a whooshing sound, Tuihai was sent flying at an even faster speed, crashing toward Zi Xiaoyun. Zi Xiaoyun didn't expect such a sudden turn of events, and he immediately reached out to catch him. However, the mighty power didn't slow him down. Instead, it was transmitted to Zi Xiaoyun. Zi Xiaoyun was caught off guard, and he was forcefully pushed back 7 or 8 steps before he finally stopped. Beneath his feet was a groove that had been dug out by his feet. Puff! Although Tuihai was saved, the power still affected his body. He couldn't hold it in any longer, and he spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot. Su Yu calmly retracted his finger and calmly said, "You probably aren't qualified to prove my abilities." His abilities far surpassed Tuihai's. Even if Tuihai attacked with all his might, he wouldn't be qualified to prove his abilities. Tuihai's eyes were wide open, and he was so shocked that he couldn't put it into words. He had never thought that one day he would be defeated so miserably. Hearing Su Yu's condescending and contemptuous words, he felt that the arrogant words he had said before were laughable. For a moment, he felt extremely ashamed. Su Yu retracted his gaze, looked past him, and looked at Zi Xiaoyun. He calmly said, "It's your turn." With a swoosh, the heaven-destroying rod appeared in his palm. Grow! All of a sudden, the heaven-destroying rod became 30 feet long, and he gripped it tightly. Zi Xiaoyun's eyelids twitched involuntarily, and he could faintly see traces of fear. When he was rescuing Tu Yihai just now, he had already vaguely sensed Su Yu's hidden powerful physical strength. Coupled with the slightly strange heaven-destroying rod in his hand, his intuition told him that danger was approaching. "Su Yu, what do you want to do to teacher?" In the East region divine manner, this is considered insubordination, do you understand? Zi Xiaoyun pretended to be calm as he berated Su Yu. Su Yu waved the heaven-destroying rod in his hand and thought for a moment, then said slowly, "I don't understand. I only know that I will not spare anyone who repeatedly pushes me too far." As he spoke, he stomped on the ground with both feet and shot towards Zi Xiaoyun in an arc. The heaven-destroying rod in his hand was instantly imbued with an infinite power of desolation. All of a sudden, the weight of the heaven-destroying rod increased dramatically, and even Su Yu's high-level heavenly dragon body could not control it. He was determined to teach Zi Xiaoyun an unforgettable lesson. Zi Xiaoyun's face changed drastically. An evil wind blew in his face, and his heart thumped wildly. He was alarmed, and he sensed an extremely rare and intense crisis. At the moment of danger, Zi Xiaoyun took out his Taoist artifact and tried to resist the heaven-destroying rod. Unexpectedly, as soon as the two collided, the Taoist artifact that Zi Xiaoyun had spent tens of thousands of years refining was smashed into pieces in the blink of an eye like mud. At the same time, the heaven-destroying rod came crashing down and hit Zi Xiaoyun's body. Even a Taoist artifact could not withstand it, let alone a human being. With a shrill scream, Zi Xiaoyun's entire body was crushed to the ground by the heaven-destroying rod and turned into a mass of meat paste. A trembling soul escaped from the pile of flesh in a panic. With the help of a drop of remaining blood essence, he barely managed to reform his body. However, compared to his previous body, his current cultivation had dropped by a whole realm. From the later stage of the celestial realm, he had fallen back to the later stage of the fish-dragon realm. Chapter 24:15. As he spoke, he turned into a beam of light and rushed towards the East region divine abode. There was both fear and anger. Su Yu smiled faintly. "Tell Xie Sanren?" If it was in the past, he would be a little afraid. But now, with his relationship with Xie Sanren, as long as he didn't kill Xie Sanren, he wouldn't be afraid. Everyone present, if anyone still thinks that my Azure Dragon group launched a sneak attack, feel free to speak up. Su will give you a chance to challenge me directly. Su Yu looked around at the crowd and spoke in a calm voice, which still emanated a great pressure. He then said, "I don't mind if you challenge me one-on-one, but I also don't mind challenging you as a group. I will accompany you to the end." The teachers and students of the Qilin team, White Tiger team, Sea Beast team, and other teams didn't even dare to breathe loudly. What a joke! Even Zi Xiaoyun's body and soul had been destroyed by a single strike of the staff. Who would dare to fight Su Yu? This is a misunderstanding. I was instigated by the Qilin team, and I did not know what was going on. One of the teachers from the White Tiger team immediately tried to explain himself when he saw Su Yu staring at him. "Me too. I have no intention of becoming enemies with the Azure Dragon group. We, the oceanic beasts, express our deepest apologies and are willing to make up for it in any way we can." However, Su Yu did not utter a single word and continued to stare at them. It wasn't until they felt apprehensive that he slowly said, You've already beaten and scolded the people from the Azure Dragon team. Isn't it too easy for you to get away with just saying that it's none of my business? As soon as these words came out, the group of teachers and students complained incessantly. If they had known that Su Yu was so powerful, how would they have dared to attack him? However, they finally understood why the Azure Dragon group was able to come out on top in the previous trial. With such a powerful backer like Su Yu, why would they worry about not being able to get the first place? Teacher Qin Hui, as well as the two of you, point out anyone who has beaten you. Return what you did to them. If anyone dares to resist, I will uphold justice for you, Su Yu said calmly. Hearing this, the expressions of the teachers and students changed. They did not show any mercy to the people from the Azure Dragon group. They were well aware of the severity of their attack. Thank you, Brother Su. Another student endured the pain and stood up. He walked in front of a tall and burly Qilin team student and used his domain to split his body in half. The latter did not dare to fight back. He could only endure it. Qin Hui and the others attacked successively, and all of them returned all the pain they'd endured. The group of teachers and students were furious, but they didn't dare to say anything. They quietly endured the beating. An hour later, Qin Hui and the others had vented enough. Su Yu looked on coldly from the side. When the matter was over, he stared at Su Ming. Why did you not attack? From the beginning to the end, Su Ming stood silently at the side without any intention of fighting back. When his name was called, Su Ming felt inexplicably flustered. He forced a smile and said, I didn't suffer too many injuries. It's fine. Su Yu slowly nodded his head, and a wisp of light flashed across his eyes. All right, since there's nothing else, you can continue with your training. Su Yu waved his hand, dispersing the crowd. He picked up the pieces of information that Zi Xiaoyun had destroyed. Where did you get your information from? Su Yu asked. The information had been destroyed, so they could only search again. Qin Hui immediately said, A person called Qin Xiener sold it to me. Who? Su Yu turned around abruptly, his eyes like two burning torches. Qin Xiener. Yes. Her name is Qin Xiener. Qin Hui was shocked by Su Yu's expression. Where is she? Qin Hui shook her head. After selling the information, she left quietly. I have no way of tracking her whereabouts. Su Yu's mind was shaken, and his heart was extremely unsettled. After so many years, the people of the West region had finally come to the East region to participate in the upcoming recruitment? But why would Qin Xiener sell information? Where did she get the information, and why did she need to sell it? Was she in the South Pole Fairy Palace in need of a large number of Tao coins? How did you know her name? Su Yu suddenly realized that Qin Xiener wouldn't be stupid enough to say her name, would she? Qin Hui said matter-of-factly. Is it difficult to know Qin Xiener? She is the most beautiful woman in the West region, and we have long heard of her in the East region. I recognized her at first sight. Qin Xiener's reputation was known even in the West region? However, Su Yu was a little confused. Qin Xiener was in the South Pole Fairy Palace, and she rarely got close to anyone. How could her reputation have spread so far? If Linchen Hong Xian, Xue Meng Feiyu, or even Xian Hua were the most beautiful women in the West region, Su Yu wouldn't have been surprised. But Qin Xiener had become the most beautiful woman in the West region, which was really inexplicable. Intuition told Su Yu that there must be a force pushing Qin Xiener to become the most beautiful woman in the West region. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been like this. Where did you meet? Thinking that Qin Xiener had also come to the East region, Su Yu couldn't help but feel excited. He was eager to rush over and meet Qin Xiener. Qin Hui said, I offered a reward through my channels, and Qin Xiener came to me. We made a deal at the border of the East and West region. As she spoke, she told Su Yu the location of the deal. Su Yu was tempted to rush over, but after careful consideration, he suppressed the desire in his heart. He was now being hunted by the Dragon Emperor, so it was best not to meet Qin Xianer so as not to implicate her. Wait a little longer, Xianer. When I remove the mark, I will definitely go and find you, Su Yu said to himself. However, the information about the great divine throne of heaven and earth would be cut off, and he wouldn't be able to find her. Right at that moment, a beautiful woman with blue pupils and long golden hair walked out from the group of sea beasts. She was as cold as frost, and her beauty was breathtaking. Carrying 2 crescent blades on her back, she slowly walked up to Su Yu and said, "You want to know about the divine throne of heaven and earth, right? Who are you?" Su Yu's eyes flickered. It was another unfamiliar student. However, the most shocking thing was that her cultivation was extremely powerful, and she was actually at the later stage of the celestial realm. Although she had just made a breakthrough, it was still shocking. Sumu. Coincidentally, she had the same surname as Su Yu. Hearing her name, Su Yu suddenly realized that she was the #1 student in the East Region's Divine Palace, Sumu. He had long heard that she was extremely talented, and her cultivation was unparalleled in the world. Now that he had met her, it was indeed true. "You have information?" Sumu nodded coldly. "Yes." Su Yu's eyes flickered. "Give me a reason to believe you." He had just taught a lesson to the students and teachers of the Sea Beasts team, so it was difficult for him to believe that Sumu would be so kind as to tell him information. Reason? Sumu decisively pulled out her blades and slashed at the students and teachers of the Sea Beasts team. He drew a deep groove between them and said coldly, "From today onwards, I will draw a clear line between the Oceanic Beast Group and the Azure Dragon Group." The students of the Eastern Region Divine Palace had the right to change groups at any time, as long as she had the ability to resist the revenge of her team. As a late-stage Heaven-tier elite, she clearly wasn't afraid of the Sea Beast Group's revenge. Chapter 24:16. They had put in a lot of effort to nurture Sumu. Yet, just as they were about to graduate, she left them and joined the Azure Dragon Group. Sumu did not understand their expressions at all. She stared at Su Yu and asked, "Is this enough?" Su Yu looked at her in surprise for a while, then nodded slowly. "Fine, I believe your information. But, what do you want?" He did not think that Sumu would give him information for free. As expected, Sumu said, "I want you to do me a favor. Tell me what it is first." Sumu looked around, then took out a formation plate and activated it. The formation plate released an exceptionally high-level isolation formation, isolating him and Su Yu within it. Even a great venerable might not be able to penetrate the formation and eavesdrop on their conversation. "You can speak now," Su Yu said. Sumu did not say a word. She quickly untied the silk belt around her waist, and her purple dress loosened. Then, with a light pinch of her jade-like fingers, she took off her clothes, revealing her beautiful body. Su Yu subconsciously averted his gaze. He frowned and asked, "What do you mean?" "Take a look at my body and you will understand." "Eh?" Su Yu looked at Sumu from the corner of his eye. He was horrified to find that Sumu's body was covered in strange blood-red symbols. Those symbols were constantly rotating, as if they were operating. The existence of the blood-red symbols had destroyed the beauty of her body, causing her beautiful face to lose its luster. "This is..." Su Yu stared at the blood-red symbols in shock. Sumu slowly put on her purple dress, then said expressionlessly, "As you can see, puppet symbols." "Puppet?" Su Yu was slightly confused. Sumu combed her messy hair and said slowly, "You should know that the students of the East Region Divine Palace never come here voluntarily." Su Yu had already known this before coming here. After all, who would want to stay in a harsh academy where they would become slaves to their classmates if they could not graduate? "I know," Su Yu said. Sumu shook her head. "But you definitely do not know where the students go after they graduate." Su Yu was slightly surprised. "Do you mean those who graduate, or those who cannot graduate?" "Those who could not graduate would become slaves to those who graduated." Of course it's those geniuses who have graduated. Suyu thought about it carefully. Speaking of which, he really didn't pay much attention to the situation of the graduates. He assumed that they had gone out to fight and train. Where are they going? They have always been in the Eastern Region Divine Palace. They have never left, Rain said indifferently. Never left? Suyu frowned deeply. He suddenly thought of something and said in disbelief. You mean, looks like evil Sanren has already shown you the 1,000 great sovereign realm semi-living puppets. Rain had a sympathetic look on her face, as if they were in the same boat. What? Suyu's heart was filled with terror. Could it be that those 1,000 semi-living puppets were all outstanding graduates? Rumor has it that the half-life puppet was created by merging a dead corpse with the remnant soul of an ancient powerhouse. Rain's eyes were filled with hatred, but if the remnant souls of the ancient Almighty were so easy to fuse, wouldn't they be able to resurrect into a half-living puppet by attaching their remnant souls to a random corpse? Suyu's eyes darkened. As expected, evil Sanren was not easy to deal with. The true method of creating a half-life puppet is to insert the remnant soul of an ancient powerhouse into a living body, destroying the original soul of the body and taking over the body. Furthermore, the requirements for the body are very strict. The body must be extremely outstanding. Otherwise, the half-life puppet will fail easily. Rain revealed the truth that no one knew about. Why does evil Sanren have to forcefully capture the outstanding people of the region to enter the Eastern Region Divine Palace? His goal is to select qualified vessels for the half-life puppet. It was no wonder that evil Sanren would use such a cruel method to force them to unleash their potential. Turned out that it was to select the most outstanding people among them. How did you know? It was hard to believe that evil Sanren would let someone who knew about the matter go instead of killing them. Rain's eyes suddenly became fierce, and there was a hint of madness in them. Because my brother was made into a half-life puppet, Rain said, tears rolling down her cheek. As for me and my brother, we were born together. Whatever happens to him, or even what he sees, I can feel it. Rain pointed at her own body. The puppet marks on my body are the best proof. There was such a strange constitution? However, it was no wonder that Rain had dared to approach Suyu. Presumably, when evil Sanren had displayed the 1,000 puppets, her brother's puppet had seen Suyu and the others. This information had been transmitted to Rain's mind. Rain, now you should know that I am working with evil Sanren, right? Suyu's eyes flickered. Aren't you afraid that I will expose you? Rain stared at Suyu coldly, warning him. If you still dare to work with evil Sanren after knowing his character, I have nothing to say. Evil Sanren had been able to make all the outstanding students of the Eastern region into half-life puppets. Working with such a cruel and inhumane person was like asking a tiger for its skin. If Suyu was smart enough, he should know what to choose. I choose to continue working with him, Suyu said with certainty. Rain was stunned for a moment. Her entire body was filled with murderous intent. Her eyes were burning with murderous intent as she held onto the two scimitars on her back. I was blind. Since that was the case, she could only kill Suyu. However, Suyu said, but I do not intend to expose you. Rain hesitated for a moment, then slowly withdrew her hand. If they really fought, she might not be Suyu's match. You just need to tell me everything you know as hush money. Suyu smiled calmly. If he was the unparalleled saint master like the old Taoist priest, he would naturally kill evil Sanren with a flick of his finger. However, his current abilities were far from being evil Sanren's match. There was no need for him to risk his life for someone unrelated. Rain decisively threw out a scroll and said solemnly, If you regret it, look for me at any time. I know some of his weaknesses. Sure. Suyu did not reject her offer. Both parties tidied up a little, then Rain removed the barrier and left expressionlessly. Emo Qinglong, who was on Suyu's back, frowned. Evil Sanren, Dragon Emperor. The waters of the outer realm are really deep. Suyu agreed. In fact, he knew even more than Mo Qinglong. At least, he knew that in the most barren land of the western region, there was a Tao Tai that could devour the heavens and the earth. That Tao Tai's stomach hid even more shocking secret. Chapter 24:17. The one who was shaking was not the divine throne of heaven and earth, but someone who was also searching for it. That was the heartless Iron Constable. According to the report, the heartless Iron Hunter and many others who were searching for the heavenly god throne had entered the most evil forbidden forest in the eastern region and had never returned. The so-called Forbidden Forest was the core area where a group of peerless almighties fought in the early era. A great era had passed, but there were still remnants of the great battle from back then. Xian Dao Masters and even the Dao Masters' domains and Dao Masters' power crisscrossed, turning that area into an absolute forbidden area. Apart from the Tunnel Masters who had the guts to enter, the rest of the experts who entered would only have a path of death. Since ancient times there has been no exception. The heartless Iron Constable clearly didn't need the heavenly throne of heaven and earth, so why did he insist on going deeper? Who was she working for? Su Yu understood. It was for him. In the Glaze ancient cave, the heartless Iron Arrester thought that Su Yu would surely die, so he wanted to do two things for him. He was looking for the divine throne of heaven and earth and Qin Xiener. Therefore, even though he knew that he would definitely die, heartless Iron Constable still had to fulfill his promise. Receiving the divine throne of heaven and earth. Now, she had gone deep within for 3 months and hadn't returned. Her situation was obvious. Why are you so stubborn? Su Yu looked up at the boundless sky, and a veiled woman riding a gold and silver horse appeared before his eyes. Her clothes were as white as snow, and she exuded a righteous aura. She wholeheartedly wanted to create light. Was such a peerless beauty going to perish just like that? Once upon a time, Su Yu felt like she could be his confidant. Apart from Xia Jingyu, she was the only person who could share a tacit understanding with him. Who would have thought that their parting in the glazed ancient cave would actually last for an eternity? A trace of sadness reverberated in his heart, causing it to feel empty, as if something was missing. How can I deserve such treatment from you? Su Yu let out a long sigh. Sad emotions silently spread. Mo Qinglong's heart was moved. He looked at the vast horizon and murmured, "Cultivation is heartless, life and death are interdependent. Don't be sad, she is just a past, and you still have a future." She also had her own friends, relatives, people whom she loved dearly, and feelings that she once wanted to protect. However, they were no match for the passage of time, the mercilessness of the great Tao, and the isolation of life and death. Therefore, she could feel Su Yu's sorrow. "Thank you." Su Yu forced himself to focus, then turned to look at Mo Qingdao. "To be honest, you don't seem like someone from the demonic path. Those who walked the demonic Tao were heartless and devoted to serving the devil. As for Mo Qinglong, he was said to be emotionless, but he had emotions. He didn't seem like a devil cultivator at all." Hearing this, Mo Qinglong smiled in relief. "I really don't know if you're praising me or mocking me. It's up to you." Su Yu looked at him and smiled. At this moment, the two of them seemed to be connected and resonated with each other. Su Yu averted his gaze unnaturally. He looked in the direction of the Forbidden Forest and took a deep breath. "Can you accompany me to the Forbidden Forest?" Mo Qinglong took a deep look at Su Yu, and his rationality told him not to go. That was because the Forbidden Forest wasn't a place that she had the qualifications to barge into. Once they entered, they would definitely die. But for some strange reason, she actually nodded. "Sure. Thank you." Su Yu gazed into the distance. What he saw was not the great divine throne of heaven and earth, but the white robe that was getting further and further away. He didn't have many friends in his life, and Wu Xian Tai was one of them. Since she was dead, Su Yu had to go and investigate. But not now. The Dragon Emperor's arrival was imminent, and Su Yu had no time to go to the Forbidden Forest. He could only go there after this matter was over. He stayed at the campsite for a few days, and when the training was over, he would return to the Azure Dragon civilization with the Azure Dragon team. Su Ming and Aou did well this time. Qin Hui was in a good mood. This time, without Su Yu's help, and with one less student than before, the Azure Dragon team still achieved an outstanding result of ranking 5th. This was thanks to the breakthrough of the coiling dragon tree's cultivation, and the great increase in strength. Teacher Qin, you flatter us. Our results are all thanks to Brother Su. Aou raised his eyebrows and said, Teacher, you don't know this, but ever since Brother Su destroyed Zi Xiaoyun's Taoist body, Su Ming and I went to hunt the demonic beasts. It was really awe-inspiring. Wherever we went, the other students all took a detour. Some of them even hunted a level 7 demonic beast, and almost beat it to death. But when we came, they abandoned the demonic beast and ran away, afraid to fight us. As he spoke, his gaze towards Su Yu was filled with admiration. Even Su Ming was not as rebellious as before. He just remained silent and did not say anything. The group was talking and laughing. Suddenly, Qin Hui said suspiciously, The situation doesn't seem right. Why haven't we seen any of the teachers and students who came back before us? They passed by several civilizations, but did not meet a single teacher or student. The Azure Dragon team is facing a disaster. Why would they still dare to come back? A few strong men from one of the civilizations noticed the Azure Dragon team passing by. That Su guy probably doesn't realize the importance of this matter. Hehe, I heard that the evil Sanren is furious. Hearing this, Qin Hui's expression was calm, but she secretly sneered. The evil Sanren was now in a cooperative relationship with her master. So what if he killed Zi Xiaoyun's Taoist body? Of course, she would not say this out loud. Aou and Su Ming did not know, so they were naturally worried. Aou reminded Su Yu kindly, Brother Su, a strong dragon cannot suppress a local snake. Why don't you go out and lie low for a while? Su Yu smiled. No need. We'll cross the bridge when we come to it. On the other hand, Su Ming's eyebrows were slightly raised, looking troubled. Wherever the group passed by, they could sense people pointing at them, as if the Azure Dragon team was facing a disaster. You are the Azure Dragon team, right? When they were about to return to the Azure Dragon civilization, an old man in a black robe blocked their way. That person was none other than Deacon Li. Qin Hui nodded. Deacon Li, what can I do for you? Deacon Li looked at Su Yu, his eyes filled with regret. The evil Sanren has ordered that once the Azure Dragon team returns, they are to head to the center of the Divine Manor immediately. Follow me. As he spoke, he led the way expressionlessly. He felt sorry for Su Yu, a late-stage celestial realm youth, who could destroy Zi Xiaoyun's Taoist body. Such talent was unheard of, and he could be called a demon among demons. Unfortunately, he had underestimated the strict rules of the East Region Divine Manor. A student destroying a teacher's Taoist body was an offense, a taboo that could not be violated by the East Region Divine Manor. Once it was violated, the evil Sanren would not care about Su Yu's talent. He would only kill Su Yu with the power of thunder to protect the dignity of the East Region Divine Manor. Su Yu's desire to stand up for the Azure Dragon team was understandable, but unfortunately, he had made a grave mistake that could not be undone. Chapter 24:18. Initially, Sies Sanren did not care. However, as the news spread and the entire East Region Divine Manor was shaken, Sies Sanren had no choice but to come forward and seek justice for Zi Xiaoyun. After the teams returned from training, they received orders from Sies Sanren to head to the center of the Divine Manor to await further orders. This was to make an example out of Su Yu and the others. It would have been fine if Su Yu and the others had not returned. Now that they had returned, their fates had been sealed. Qin Hui was suddenly anxious. Could Sies Sanren have changed his mind and wanted to harm Su Yu? Otherwise, why would he be so serious? Su Ming's expression changed rapidly. He was extremely hesitant. Not long after, in the center of the divine manor, in a place overflowing with evil chi, a group of people stood upright. They had respectful expressions as they faced a skinny old man who was silently meditating in front of them. When Su Yu and the others arrived, the old man slowly opened his eyes and said in a hoarse voice, "Are you all here?" Everyone's expressions became solemn, and they all turned their gazes toward Su Yu simultaneously. The teachers and students of the Ocean Beast Group, White Tiger Group, and even the Qilin Group could not wait to gloat. How could their teacher's Taoist body be so easily destroyed? Next, they would have to wait for the severe punishment. Zi Xiaoyun stood beside Xie Sanren, glaring at Su Yu with vengeance. His eyes were filled with vengeance. He was a teacher who had performed meritorious deeds for many years. What was Su Yu? He was just a student who had made a name for himself. It wasn't hard to tell who was more important in evil Sanren's heart. "Su Yu, come over here." As expected, Xie Sanren called out Su Yu's name with his hands behind his back. Under the gazes of the crowd, Su Yu walked over expressionlessly. "What do you have to say?" Xie Sanren asked. He was already prepared to deal with Su Yu. Zi Xiaoyun was elated. Xie Sanren was getting serious. Everyone shook their heads. Su Yu was finished. "Don't implicate the innocent," Su Yu said calmly. Hearing this, many people looked at Qin Hui and the others. Su Yu was about to die, but he still wanted to protect the Azure Dragon Group. However, he might not succeed. "What if I say no?" Xie Sanren said calmly. Indeed. Xie Sanren had always punished this kind of taboo matter heavily. The expressions of Qin Hui and the rest of the people changed drastically. What was going on? Had the evil Sanren really given up on working with Su Yu? Even they would be implicated? Su Ming's face instantly turned pale. After a brief struggle, he gritted his teeth and suddenly rushed out of the Azure Dragon Group. He ran behind Zi Xiaoyun and said loudly, "I have something to announce." Actually, as early as half a year ago, I had already secretly turned to the Qilin Group and drew a clear line with the Azure Dragon Group. The crowd burst into an uproar. I was wondering why the members of the Azure Dragon Group were all ganged up on during the battle in the camp, while Su Ming was the only one with superficial injuries. So it turns out that he had betrayed us long ago. That's to be expected. Su Ming has such a special identity. The Qilin Group and other higher-ranked groups, which one of them hasn't coveted him for a long time? It's only a matter of time before Su Ming leaves Azure Dragon Group. The Azure Dragon Group is deserted by everyone, right? As the crowd discussed, Qin Hui's eyes widened as she stared at Su Ming in disbelief. She asked in a deep voice, "Su Ming, were you the one who leaked the information that I obtained the Heavenly Divine Throne?" She had always found it strange that only the Azure Dragon Group knew about the Heavenly God Throne. How did Zi Xiaoyun know about it and snatch it from him? There was a traitor. Su Ming tilted his head to the side, his nostrils flaring as a sign of tacit agreement. "Ingrate." Qin Hui spat softly, her heart aching. Back then, in order to nurture Su Ming, the Azure Dragon Group had given everything they had. But in the end, Su Ming had secretly betrayed them. Qin Hui no longer cared about Su Ming's abilities. She only cared about being deceived. "TCH, you were willing to treat me well. I didn't beg you." Su Ming curled his lips disapprovingly, not at all grateful for the Azure Dragon Group's kindness. Zi Xiaoyun gave him a thumbs up and laughed. "Well said. Don't blame others for your stupidity." Qin Hui and the other two glared at him, their hearts burning with anger. Su Yu, on the other hand, felt that everything was logical. With Su Ming's temperament, it was in his nature to forsake righteousness at the sight of profit. What was so strange about betraying the Azure Dragon Group? When he saw Su Ming at the camp, Su Yu already knew that Su Ming had betrayed them. Including the act with Tuihai that caused the Azure Dragon Group to be surrounded and attacked, it was also Su Ming's doing. "Enough, all of you, shut up." The evil Sanren was not angry, but he was powerful, causing everyone present to fall silent. The final outcome had finally arrived. The evil Sanren slowly put down his hands. Just as I said, if one person makes a mistake, the whole group will be punished, not just one person. The Azure Dragon group was finished. The Qilin group, Zi Xiao Yun, will be banished from the East Region Divine Manor, never to step into the East Region again. The rest of the group will become slaves for 7 days as punishment. Wait. Who was being punished? The Qilin group? Zi Xiao Yun and the group's teachers and students? Did evil Sanren make a mistake? The victim was Zi Xiao Yun. Why was the punishment not for the culprit, but for the victim? Zi Xiao Yun himself was stunned. He turned around and hurriedly said, "Evil Sanren, please be clear. The one whose body was destroyed was me, not Su Yu." He felt that the evil Sanren had misunderstood something. Unexpectedly, the evil Sanren coldly looked at him and said, "You framed others and maliciously besieged the Azure Dragon group, and now you dare to come to me and accuse me." His words caused everyone present to break out in cold sweat. The evil Sanren was not present, but he could clearly see what had happened. Thud! Zi Xiao Yun broke out in a cold sweat and knelt down, not daring to argue. "Evil Sanren, please forgive me. I won't do it again. On account of your many years of meritorious service, I'll spare your life. Get lost." The evil Sanren waved his hand. Zi Xiao Yun did not dare say another word. He immediately lowered his head and slipped away from the crowd. "The rest of the group will be slaves for a week." The evil Sanren flicked his sleeves and left. The crowd was left in an uproar. Who can tell me why this is happening? Even if Zi Xiao Yun was in the wrong, isn't it too much to banish him? Moreover, it is a fact that Su Yu destroyed Zi Xiao Yun's body. Why did the evil Sanren turn a blind eye to it? The smarter ones had already understood the deeper meaning behind it, and they all came forward to talk to Su Yu. They understood that the brightest star in the East Region Divine Manor was rising. Su Yu casually responded to them, then left the crowd and returned to the Azure Dragon civilization. In the next year, he would use every second to comprehend the 9-5 supremacy technique and strive to completely control the Royal Dragon Sword. At the same time, Zi Xiao Yun left the East Region Divine Manor pathetically and wandered aimlessly in the void. His mind was blank, and he still could not understand why the evil Sanren would make such an incomprehensible decision. Was the strict rules of the East Region Divine Manor no longer important? Was Su Yu really valued by the evil Sanren? Was he really going to fall into such a dire situation? Chapter 24:19. Who is it? Zi Xiao Yun's heart skipped a beat. With his current cultivation of the late-stage fish-dragon realm, someone had approached him without him knowing. He looked up abruptly and saw a beautiful woman in a red dress with heavy makeup standing in front of him. Zi Xiao Yun stepped back vigilantly and stared at the other party. "Who are you?" The latter blinked her eyes charmingly and said in a low voice, "I'm here to seek refuge with my husband. Please pass on a message for me." Zi Xiao Yun felt nauseous. The person in front of him was beautiful and could be called a stunner, but why did her voice sound like a man's? "Who is your husband?" Zi Xiao Yun suppressed his discomfort and asked calmly. This woman was a bit strange, and he did not want to offend her. "Su Yu." If it was someone else, Zi Xiao Yun might have kindly passed on the message. But for Su Yu, he wanted nothing more than to skin him and eat his flesh. "That little beast?" Zi Xiao Yun blurted out and snorted angrily. As soon as the words left his mouth, he realized that something was wrong and immediately looked at the woman's face. Just a moment ago, she was smiling and flirting with him, but in the blink of an eye, she had turned gloomy and was staring at him coldly. "You insulted my husband? Old thing, I was patient enough to ask you because you were pretty, but now it seems that there is no need for that." "Wait, Zi Xiao Yun wanted to explain. But how could the infamous Madame Poison Fate be manipulated by others? She immediately caught him. With a fierce look on her face, she forcibly searched his soul. Green smoke came out of Zi Xiaoyun's head, his eyes turned white, and his body trembled violently. This was because his soul was forcibly searched, and the process was extremely painful. After the soul search, Zi Xiaoyun's eyes were dull, and he was foaming at the mouth. He had become an idiot. Humph! Madame Poison Fate threw him down and said angrily, "He is indeed the person I fancied. I didn't expect Xie Sanren to think so highly of him. You are willing to sacrifice a meritorious minister of the later stage of the celestial realm for him. Well, it seems that I have to pay a little price," Madame Poison Fate said painfully, "but in order to get true love, these sacrifices are worth it." After making up her mind, Madame Poison Fate stepped into a group of civilizations in the East region. As soon as he entered, several celestial tier auras came head-on. They were the law enforcers in charge of maintaining order. "Who are you?" Deacon Li, the leader of the group, looked Madame Poison Life up and down in surprise. Madame Poison Fate stroked her hair coquettishly and said haughtily, "A group of mortals is not fit to speak to me. Get lost." Deacon Li's facial muscles twitched, and he felt his scalp go numb. This woman, no, where did this man come from? This is a restricted area of the East Region Deity Mansion. Unauthorized personnel are not allowed to enter. "Leave immediately," Deacon Li shouted sternly. Madame Poison snorted charmingly. "I'm here to find my true love. Don't even think about stopping me." As he spoke, he forcefully barged in. Deacon Li and the others immediately stepped forward to stop her, but they were all scattered by Madame Poisonous Life's charge. At the same time, she kept shouting, "Su Yu, my husband, I'm here for you. Come out quickly." Deacon Li was shocked and angered by the collision. "Do it." The group of deacons took out their doctrine artifacts and chased after Madame Poison Life. Just as they were about to attack her, a loud voice came from the sky. "Back off. How dare you act rashly in front of Madame Poison Life?" A skinny, stooped figure came over, stepping on an evil energy that filled the sky. "Xie Sanren." Deacon Li and the others bowed respectfully, but their hearts were filled with shock. That person, who was neither a man nor a woman, was actually the famous Madame Poison Life of the East Pole Market? Deacon Li shuddered when he thought of the rumor that she liked men even though she was a man. Madame Poison Life rolled her eyes at Deacon Li. "I'm not interested in old bones like you. Don't worry." Then, she looked at Xie Sanren and twisted her slender waist. "Io, I haven't seen you for tens of thousands of years. Xie Sanren, you've aged really fast. You were such a graceful gentleman back then. How did you age so quickly after tens of thousands of years?" For a strong man at Xie Sanren's level, tens of thousands of years was only a 10,000th of his lifespan. However, he had aged rapidly from a middle-aged man to an old man. It was obvious that there was something strange about it. "Madame Poison Life, you're still the same." Xie Sanren smiled. "I wonder what brings you here?" He and Madame Poison Life had been in the East region for many years, but they had never interfered with each other. Today, the other party must have come with bad intentions. Madame Poison Life chuckled and casually pulled out a weary-looking middle-aged man. It was none other than Dan Haiqing. "Xie Sanren, save me!" Dan Haiqing looked confused. When he saw Xie Sanren in front of him, he immediately shouted for help. Xie Sanren looked at him indifferently and said, "Madame Poison Life, what do you mean by this?" Madame Poison Life sneered. "You'll have to ask the people you taught, what did they do in my territory?" He waved his sleeve, and a fluorescent light flew into the air, turning into a moving image. In the image, Dan Haiqing slaughtered many shopkeepers and snatched the myriad Tao stone. Seeing this, Xie Sanren's expression was as calm as before. He nodded slightly. "I see. Well, I'll take responsibility for my own actions. You can do whatever you want with this person." He had chosen to abandon Dan Haiqing. "Humph! How could it be so easy?" Madame Poison Life said. Do you think it's so easy to kill someone from the East Pole market? She was obviously asking for compensation. Sanren was not angered. What do you want? I want. Sue you. Hand him over. Madame Poisonlife finally revealed her true intentions. Hearing this, Sanren's eyes flashed. Did Madame Poisonlife know how important Sue you was to her? Otherwise, why would she ask for Sue you by name? No. Sanren refused resolutely. If it had been before, he could have given Madame Poisonlife a whole bunch of Sue you, much less one. But now, he absolutely could not. Madame Poisonlife said coldly, Sanren, are you going to start a war with me over Sue you? A formless aura was released with a loud bang. A thick, pitch-black poisonous fog was spat out from her body. Dan Haiching screamed in pain as he turned into a white skeleton, his body and soul destroyed by the poison. Deacon Li and the others retreated, afraid to be caught in the crossfire. They could not understand why Madame Poisonlife would go to such lengths for Sue you. But what confused them even more was that Sanren snorted softly, uncompromising. If you want to fight, let's fight. I'm not afraid of you. Madame Poisonlife laughed angrily. Old man, don't be like an old cow eating young grass. Sue you is mine. Her voice was so loud that it was difficult for the great civilizations of the East Region Divine Manor not to hear it. Sue you, who was in the middle of his training, was suddenly awakened. His face darkened. How persistent! Madame Poisonlife was persevering even after being destroyed by the waves of light. Hee. Emo Qinglong could not help but cover his mouth and laugh. Why don't you just marry her? Get lost. Sue you was not in a good mood. Don't let anyone disturb me for the next year. He sealed the secret room completely and would not show himself until the Dragon Emperor arrived. Chapter 24:20. Sue you did not care. Soon, a fight broke out in the outside world. Madame Poisonlife dragged the Sanren along and fought for 10 days and 10 nights. They fought from the East Region Divine Manor all the way to the depths of the universe and several galaxies away. It was only when the Sanren had no choice but to use a great venerable half-living puppet to scare Madame Poisonlife away. What a madman! The evil Sanren came back with a guilty look on his face full of anger. Obviously, he did not have much of an advantage in the fight with Madame Poisonlife. The main reason was that he was already injured, which was why he was at a disadvantage. However, Madame Poisonlife did not leave. She lingered near the East Region Divine Manor, refusing to leave. She tried to barge in from time to time, making it difficult for the Sanren to recover from his injuries. Time passed slowly. In the depths of the East Region, there was a chaotic area filled with ripples of light. The area was filled with the aura of destruction. Heaven and earth were chaotic, and it was impossible to distinguish the boundaries because of the fragmentation. The surrounding space was either damaged or narrow. Occasionally, there were flashes of remnant energy comparable to the destructive light ripples. In this deathly silent place, a figure in a snow-white robe staggered and fell into a narrow space. Behind her, a long snake of spiritual energy was roaring angrily, chasing after her. The snake was formed by the aftershocks of the nearby battles. It was even more dangerous than the destructive light ripples. Even a late-stage Great Venerable would be turned into ashes if they encountered it. The woman in the snow-white robe looked back. Her beautiful face was calm and determined. Without saying a word, she fled deeper into the forest. She was the heartless Iron Hunter, who had been missing for many years in the Forbidden Forest. She was not dead, but she was still walking on the path of death. Human, leave this place. The long snake chased after her, scolding her with great resentment. Otherwise, you will sleep with this place. The heartless Iron Hunter did not look back. She did not even frown as she stubbornly continued forward. If I leave, who will fulfill his wish? The heartless Iron Hunter took a step forward. A fresh bloodstain appeared under her foot. Stubborn. The long snake snorted. Suddenly, it turned into a straight ray of light, piercing through the delicate body of the heartless iron hunter. The heartless iron hunter clenched her teeth and took out the golden black tortoise. With a ding, the golden Xuanwu successfully blocked the attack. However, the powerful force of the ray itself sent the heartless iron catcher flying forward and crashing into a broken spatial barrier. Dong, the entire spatial barrier shattered. The heartless iron arrester's body at the half-step downward level was unable to endure such an injury, and his flesh instantly split open. The dazzling bright red instantly dyed her snow-white dress red. She struggled to get up. Although her face was as pale as paper, her eyes were still persistent and calm. I said, I must complete that person's last wish. Unless I can't take another step. Shaking his weak body, the heartless iron catcher moved forward with difficulty. Wherever it passed, the blood would condense into a line. The ray of light bounced back and turned back into a snake. A look of pity appeared in its eyes, which seemed to contain some intelligence. Humans, how could you do this? Are you willing to sacrifice yourself for the wishes of the dead? It was originally the king of an area in the Forbidden Forest. One day, a group of uninvited guests broke into the Forbidden Forest. It saw with its own eyes that they died tragically under the destructive power of the ancient remnant. The peerlessly beautiful woman in white was not spared either. She was only able to escape death because she had a strange artifact to protect herself. However, her body had already suffered irreparable injuries. In its perception, this woman's life force was rapidly withering like a winter flower. If she returned to the outside world and healed her injuries, perhaps she could still be saved. However, the Forbidden Forest was full of remnant energy, and her life would only be lost at an accelerated rate. Her life force could only last for a year at most. But even so, this seemingly weak human woman continued to move forward with inconceivable indifference and persistence. Her goal was to fulfill the wish of a dead person. I could not understand. You don't understand, and you won't understand. The heartless iron hunter did not say a word. She leaped into the spatial gap in front of her and entered another space. That space was a land of raging fire. Even a late-stage Grand Venerable would die tragically under that kind of fire. Even with the protection of the golden Xuanwu, she could not hold on for long. Human, you are close to the holy ground of the Forbidden Forest. Leave quickly, or you will never be able to leave. The long snake's eyes were moved as it stared at the white residual shadow in the raging fire. The heartless iron hunter did not say a word. She hugged her arms tightly and endured the intense heat of the fire. Like a moth flying into a flame, she walked towards the center of the holy ground, where there was a huge blazing ball of light. There was a floating divine throne, flickering under the light of the fire. As the heartless iron hunter continued to step forward, her body was melting at a speed visible to the naked eye under the increasingly intense heat. Until, with a poof, her whole body disappeared in the flames that filled the sky. The long snake, entrenched outside, let out a long sigh. I will never understand the feelings of human beings. Sigh, with a silent sigh, the long snake turned into scattered energy and slowly dissipated. At the same time, Suyu, who was far away in the East region divine manor, was in the midst of meditation when he woke up from his deep meditation without warning. His expression was blank, but the corners of his eyes were moist. Why do I feel sad all of a sudden? Suyu asked, wiping the tears from the corners of his eyes with his index finger. He looked down at his own heart, which was inexplicably tight at the moment. It was as if he was sobbing silently, and it was extremely uncomfortable. What's wrong? Mo Qinglong's gentle voice sounded in his ears. Su Yu's inexplicable sadness affected her. Is it about your friend from the Forbidden Forest? Mo Qinglong asked slowly. Su Yu shook his head slightly. I hope it's not because of her. If the farewell at the Glaze ancient cave was truly eternal, it would be a lifelong regret for him. Be patient. After the brand is removed, I will go with you to the forbidden forest. Thank you. Su Yu took a deep breath, forcibly suppressing the loneliness in his heart, and continued his meditation. After October, Su Yu woke up from his deep meditation once again. This time, it was no longer sadness, but an inexplicable panic. He tore open the front of his shirt to take a look. A ferocious dragon head had appeared on the surface of his body, and it was roaring continuously. Emo Qinglong's expression was grave. Are you mentally prepared? Emo Qinglong asked in a serious voice. This day had finally come. The Dragon Emperor had already stepped into the East region. The brand on both of their bodies had an obvious reaction. Faster than expected. At that moment, a hoarse voice sounded outside their secret chamber. When they opened the door of the secret chamber, they saw that it was Xie Sanren.